Before we start this afternoon, the Constable of St Saviour, I understand, wishes to make a statement to the Assembly.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you very, very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to speak in order to explain that I may have inadvertently misled the Assembly. That was for P36 and the amendment for the removal of St Saviour's Fields. When I was questioned and then I was accused of grossly misleading the Assembly in my statement given on Friday, the 18th of March, when Field 530 was being debated, I asked my works manager to revisit the field on Monday the 21st after receiving an email from the Minister, Deputy Young. When my works manager returned, he advised me that there were cows grazing, but they were actually in the adjoining field, and there was only a wire dividing them, and when we originally viewed the field, we had mistakenly thought that the cows were grazing in field 530. So I hope that clears that up. However, there is a brook on the east side of the meadow, which is capped, and the watercourse is still there and runs into Swiss Valley. In fact, this is mentioned in the draft island plan, page 362. I'd like to apologize to the Assembly for unintentionally misleading them, but I understand that my objection for the fields being filled in and being built on still stands. And my only error was cows grazing in the field, for which I am truly sorry. And thank you very much to the Greffier for allowing me to say this. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Conatap. Well, the next item on the agenda is the third amendment, which has been lodged by Deputy Gardner, and I ask the Greffier to read that amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words, except that, A, within policy CI8, the words within 10 minutes walking distance or 1,000 metres from the site should be replaced with within 5 minutes walking distance or 500 metres from the site each time that they appear. B, within policy CI8, after paragraph 3, insert the words, if any such agreed off-site contribution cannot be met within the specified distance, new play space must be provided elsewhere and evidence of options considered must be provided, together with a justification for the proposed location and an explanation as to how this will benefit the occupants of the development. C, before policy CI8, insert the following new proposal. The Minister for the Environment will work with the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture and the Minister for Children and Education to develop a play strategy for the island with a specific focus on play area provision in St Helier. And D, before policy CI8, insert the following new proposal. The Minister for the Environment will develop and publish supplementary planning guidance for developers in relation to the provision of play space.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. And as you could hear, amendment in front of you, it's discussing play areas and specifically in St Helier. Adequate play space is not just something it would be good to have, not something that can be done afterthought. It's right of children and it's something they need in order to grow into healthy, rounded adults. Just to remind members, development benefits of playground include the following: coordination and motor skills, cognitive skills, social human language, and more. Doctors, scientists, and educators have all conducted researches and proved this critical fact. Without being able to play, children may develop the skills mentioned and above at severely stunted rate. It's just like eating, sleeping each day. Play is vital for a child to develop the necessary skills at a healthy pace. I would like to let know to the members that I am very pleased that Minister accepted parts C and D of my amendment, and I will read them out so it will be clear where my views and Minister's views are allied, and I will indicate in advance that I would be taking parts separately. So what's Minister accepted is part C, that the Minister for Environment will work with the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture and the Minister for Children and Education to develop a play strategy for the island with a specific focus on play area provision in St. Helier. As you can see, it's my theme to bring ministers together that will develop joined-up strategy, and I'm pleased that it has been accepted. D, the Minister for the Environment will publish supplementary planning guidance for developers in relation to the provision of play areas. Minister and myself, we disagree on part A when I ask to replace 10 minutes and 1 kilometer to 5 minutes and 500 meters, and part B is actually giving you flexibility. So if we are throwing out part A, the part B doesn't really matter. But I would like to bring members' attention, and if members have a bridging island plan in front of you, or you can open so you can understand why I'm proposing what I'm proposing, page 238. And I urge members to open page 238 to see, please. If you can see on page 238, at the top, you have adopted benchmark standards for open space in town. It's our own adopted benchmarks in 2010 for open space in town. The second row, play areas, access standard, 500 meters. This is our own adopted benchmark. Our benchmark is already higher than in European cities. In European cities, it's 300 meters. So we already adopted benchmark, which is higher. If you will go to the second table on the same page 238, summary of performance against St. Helier benchmark standards, which has been done before development on the Bridging Island plan. Can you see the percentage of the play areas in 500 meters? 39%. So what we are proposing actually now, we proposing to say, you know what, let's ditch 500 that we put as a benchmark. Let's ditch that we have 39%. Let's increase it for 1,000, and we'll have amazing number. We have 80% accessibility instead of 39 that we adopted. Don't forget the 1,000, it's almost 3 times less than in European cities. So no reason for this disparity is included in the plan. And I would like members to reflect, what does it mean in practical terms? I just decided to do the exercise. Walking route on Google Maps from Howard Davis Park to FB Fields is 1 kilometer walk according to Google Maps. I'm sure if you use direct measurements, probably it will be closer and less than 1 kilometer. I wouldn't describe this as a pleasant walk suitable for a woman with a pram and toddler, and this has to be seen as a target user group. In effect, we need to design our play areas infrastructure for the most vulnerable and needy play area users in mind. For example, if you're thinking about single mom with no car, a pram and toddler, juggling between work, home, childcare, 10 or 20 minutes walk is a huge difference in our busy life. Just remember yourself as parents for young children. By settling distance of 1 kilometer from any location, what we would do with an area to be 2 kilometers apart essentially creates no new target, even worse target that we will think. Where is the small community agenda? I have it that St. Ones have 4,600 population. If I'm thinking about population from Rouge Bouillon roundabout up to St. John, we probably see more than 4,600 population, and we have only one play area that was built by the parish next to the La Cloves, which is available for the public. I do support St. Helier skate park, and I'll look forward for this be completed. I can see how all the children will be happy to go to Millennium Park and Millbrook Park and use these places, but the play areas, they can be small. I mean, what's the child, 2-year-old or 1-year-old or 3-year-old needs? A slide, a swing, and a couple places to run. This is about everyday play. And if you think about St. Helier schools that don't have much outside place, and children in St. Helier who lives in the flats, most of them, I think to go outside of our own benchmark is wrong. St. Helier builds homes without gardens, lots of homes without outdoor space, essential play areas, community gardens is really important. And paragraph B, I would just to explain for the members why I inserted, because I do realize not in every development, I cannot say just this and no flexibility. Paragraph B actually saying the application who is applying for development need to prove there is no way to put some type of playground and the proximity, and it needs to be built in different place, and if they can prove it, they can have it. It's not restricting. So I'm asking members to consider, would we like to stay with our benchmarks, or we would like to double it? Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded? Yes. Deputy Young?
Thank you, ma'am. A really important amendment, but one which is quite technical in nature, and I think the Deputy has explained it very well. This affects policy C18, which is on page 243, the policy and how we deal with new development applications for family homes, and the requirements for play space that we are proposing to apply. And the policy, if you read it, it's got two bits in it. It's got one that relates to smaller developments between 5 and 10 family homes, and the other one with the same intention for where we get larger developments, 10 homes. At the moment, what that requires is that there is a necessary that as part of an application, they are intended to include play space, and the requirement has been stated in the draft policy within 10 minutes of walking distance of the homes, or 1,000 metres from the site. That's the standard which we applied in both. The reason why we got it in two different policies, one for the small and one for larger, is that in the smaller one, where that's not possible, they can make a payment which will be like what you might call a planning contribution through a planning agreement to providing that space somewhere else. And indeed, there's a stronger provision where there will need to be a much greater off-site provision under the 10 family homes. So now, the key thing of this amendment is clearly, although it's quite technical, is what is the standard that's been adopted, and why have we gone in the plan for 10 minutes or 1,000 metres? And the Deputy is absolutely right that for many, many years we have been really poor at this, no question. Many developments have been allowed, particularly in town, that don't meet play space or provision at all, let alone within a close distance. And of course, those adopted standards, these were adopted a number of years ago when the open space studies were done, and I think all of the open space studies done have shown, and I can't remember how many there are, but lots of them, that we're well short, we're lamentably short of this. And of course the rate of achievement is, as is the table below, it is low. Now, what do? The reason why we've set in here the 1,000 metres in 10 minutes is the question of achievability. It's simple practicalities, given the fact that the constrained availability of land in our 46 square miles and the amount, I think we all know in Jersey that everybody's on top of one another. You know, people have small back gardens. We are used to living very close together. Other places don't have that. They've got more open space, more land. Land is not as acutely short as it is, and in particular, St. Helier. So with the planning officers, this is not mine, the planning officers have put this forward, and of course the planning inspectors reported that they thought that was the right approach. It's about being practical. But of course, members can, I'm not going to argue against the principle, members can adopt it. But we have to then ask ourselves, well, okay, if we had that standard, what if a developer can't achieve that within a development, the new standard? And so that's where we get the Part B come in. And what Part B currently seeks is to introduce a new clause that says new play space must be provided somewhere else, and the justification and all that kind of thing. Because where might that somebody else be? And I thought, again, the advice I've had from the planning officers is they think that if we have that clause, it's likely that that will become the de facto result on every one. That, in other words, they won't apply the standard, they'll just bung in somewhere else. Well, it's a judgment for members. It's, I'm not standing here saying this is wrong. The question is, how can we, in my view, the Bridging Island Plan needs to be achievable. And that was one of the criteria that we asked the planning inspector to report on. So that is why I've not been able to recommend what is a very well-intentioned and well-drafted amendment. And it will be for members to say whether they go with that or not, whether they stick with the original wording of the policy, which is the 10 minutes, 1,000 metres. I haven't got any figures to back it up. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. My belief is that many developments been allowed don't have play space provision at all. And so my expectation is that the policy before you, the policy in the draft plan, is an improvement. But does it achieve the better result? Does it achieve that which exists in elsewhere? I mean, I wasn't aware that the European standard is 300 metres. It'd be wonderful if we could achieve that. Sounds like the sort of thing we perhaps should have thought of, tried to adopt a standard a good number of years ago, but where we are not starting in the best place. So I'm in members' hands on this. My recommendation is to stick with the plan as drafted. And of course, the other parts I've agreed, parts C and D are, automatic, no question. It is an issue for members' choice. I wish I could provide you with a lot more factual analysis to be able to help you make that choice. I can't. It's going to have to be a subjective judgment. Bear in mind, we're dealing with very dense open areas. We're not really talking, I don't think, about developments out in the villages and all that. This is about probably places, developments in town, conversions of offices, hotels and the like, where we're trying to get large numbers of residential units in a higher density situation. There we are, sir. Ma'am, beg your pardon, thank you.
Deputy Ward,
Clarification, please.
are you
Mark?
willing to give way, Minister, for a point of clarification?
Of course, yes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Minister. I was just going to ask, I'm a bit confused because the policy says 1,000 metres or a 10-minute walk. And I just checked, and a 10-minute walk as defined by estate agents is 800 metres. And in the general thing is 800 metres for a 10-minute walk, the average walking speed. So are we saying that this has got to be between 800 to 1,000 metres, because there seems to be an inconsistency between a 10-minute walk and 1,000 metres? I just want a clarification on what that means so that we can get some picture of how far away this will be. Please, ma'am, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Minister.
It does say, sir, a man. I'm going to have to take the advice, I'm sorry to tell you. I wasn't aware that estate agents walk faster than other people.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last week because people were...
Ma'am, am I able to come back with a promise that information if I circulate to all states members before we close the
I think
debate?
that's acceptable, Minister.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, ma'am, the other clarification is whether they walk as fast as Deputy Iyer, because if you've ever walked with him, 10 minutes is about 8 miles. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, Marvin. I rise just to respond to Deputy Ward again, and this is about play with children. And the depending what sort of a child you've got, you go a great deal of distance in 10 minutes or you don't go very far in 10 minutes. And I get really, really concerned about subjectivity that the Minister's referring to and distances. You know, you put a circle around a site in town, that doesn't mean you get to a site so far away from it. You know, buildings make it difficult, roads make it difficult, pavements make it difficult. I'm quite concerned about setting limits of either distances walked or time taken to walk. It's really concerning. I think we need to be really careful. We're trying to achieve something here, and what we're trying to achieve is really good, but we could be making a rod for our own back if we're not careful.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, Ma'am. Ma'am, I think what's happened, I want to thank Deputy Gardner for this, because yes, it is technical and she's absolutely spot on in what she's saying. And I think what she presented was a logical and progressive argument for why what's in the island plan is wrong. It's just simply inadequate. Aside from the 8 minutes or a kilometre and how far you walk 10 minutes or a kilometre and how far you walk, I was just about to do a basic search on distance from the centre of Millennium Park, where there's play space, and what a kilometre circumference is from there. And it's just about all of the built-up areas. And what really concerns me, and this debate, I thank you for this, because it's clarified, Ma'am, in my head, a huge issue that I have with this island plan, which is this notion of a planning contribution. And this is what I was trying to vocalise a few times already, that what planners can do is say, well, we can't actually do that because we don't want to, but we'll make a contribution to play space elsewhere. But when you actually look at the map of the centre of St Helier, and I am talking about that because that's what I represent and that's what I'm here for, I'm sure other deputies from their areas can say the same thing. If you go within a kilometre of those built-up areas, you could build developments with absolutely no play space, no space at all for children, and make a planning contribution. And the planning contribution is simple. We'll fund some play equipment in Millennium Park. And if I was a planning, somebody who wants to develop and make maximum profit from my development, I'm sure I could get away with that, so I'd do it. And this is an inadequacy in the island plan. And I'd like to say, Ma'am, I can't see any reason why we can't say, if you're going to have a development, you will have a space for children to play in it. Full stop. There will be space for children to play. And as Deputy Gardner says, and we've had small children, I can remember a swing and somewhere to run about and a small space and a seesaw or something is adequate. They want somewhere to play, just for those hour of the day, to get them out of the house and have a little bit of a break. And to wear them out a bit before bed. Let's be honest about it, that's what you want to do. And you need to make that space. And I see all parents in this assembly now stamping their feet because it's absolutely right. And it doesn't have to be so insurmountable. And what really troubles me is we are going to agree an island plan where something so simple and so basic is so insurmountable. It does not make any sense for me. And I honestly will say, this planning contribution part to the plan, I think, is a fundamental error in the plan. And this is what will lead to a developer's charter. Particularly when we have a small island and some very built-up areas with concentrated populations. That's the issue. And again, thank you to Deputy Gardner for putting some clarity in my mind to be able to vocalise my massive concerns with this. And I'm sure we'll come back to it when we speak on the final island plan. I urge members to accept this amendment as the very basic thing that we can do. 500 metres is still a huge area around for developments where you don't have to put play space. And I noted down a word just to say, I don't know, sorry, Ma'am, sorry, I can't remember what I put this here, but basically, it was the point that the Minister made about it becoming the standard. If we put 500 metres away, it becomes the standard. What we've seen from previous buildings is, the standard is don't build anything at all. And if we allow 1,000 metres or a 10-minute walk, whether it's my 10-minute walk, it's probably not 1,000 metres, and Deputy Ayers, this is more than 1,000 metres, then we will not build at all. And so I think we talked a lot about straw man arguments before. I think we've got another one here, but it's a really important one because it will actually mean we won't have proper play space for our children. And, you know, I was going to say it. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Let's forget that putting children first if we can't even build somewhere for them to play when we're building places for them to live. It's absolutely ludicrous. I urge members to support this as the best of a bad bunch. Thank you, Mum.
Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, Mum. It is a very, very interesting proposition. And speaking through the chair, rather than directly, I'll say I'd like to thank Deputy Gardner for bringing that proposition. I almost didn't speak through the chair then. But actually, I don't think the proposition gets to the heart of what's needed, and I believe Deputy Ward actually said what's needed. If you're doing a development, if a developer is building 50 homes, 100 homes, they should be including play space in there. It shouldn't be a question of 500 metres or 1,000 metres. It's actually irrelevant. And then, when the developer, this brings me to the next point, when a developer does incorporate open space and outdoor play areas into those developments, the quality of those areas is fundamentally important, as is the maintenance of those areas. Because again, there is always a danger, regardless of any standard that's adopted, that a play space is put there on day one, but 10 years later, it's falling down and hasn't been maintained properly. So, you know, whilst this is a perfectly reasonable proposition, I don't have any problems with it. I don't think it will even begin to actually deal with the issue. And I think now to a planning application we had on Kensington Place when I was on the planning committee for the redevelopment of the Revere Hotel. And one of the concerns I had there on the planning committee was they created open space, very tall buildings, at least 6, if not more, stories from memory. And they were very pleased because they were putting some open grass areas at the back, they said, for children to play. Well, those open grass areas at the back were at the back for a start, and the back was facing east. And because of the nature of the streets behind there as well, I worked out that actually those spaces would receive sunlight probably between the hours of, in the summer, high summer, probably between the hours of kind of 5 and 7 in the morning. Outside of that time, there would be no sunlight in those areas. So why would you create play spaces for children that receive no sunlight? As a result of that, I voted against that particular proposition, but the other members of the committee felt otherwise, which is fine. But it really brought home this idea of it's actually quality that counts. The distance from a development to the play space is irrelevant if that play space is run down and not very good. On the distance front, though, I would say, and I think Deputy Ward tried to say this, and this is where I think I was won over to Deputy Gardner's proposition, because I listened to the Deputy of St Martin, I listened to Deputy Young, and I thought what they said was reasonable. But actually, if you adopt the island plan's suggested distances, 1 kilometre from the Ann Street site, which isn't far from the centre of Millennium Park, so looking at a similar thing, 1 kilometre from the Ann Street site, which is currently being developed, that basically takes you to West Park. It's a really long way away. So, you know, somebody developing at Ann Street can quite happily say, well, there's some play space over there at West Park, that fits, don't worry about it. 500 metres is still really a long way away. And I would expect that, so therefore, I would expect that actually, rather than it being 500 metres, the planning officers should be insisting, no, you need to put play space in the developments you're building, not you need to put play space within 500 metres. So I'm perfectly content with Deputy Gardner's amendment. I do have a criticism of it, and that it doesn't go far enough. I do apologise. You spotted this, I didn't, and you were right to spot it. Sorry, Ma'am. I hold myself to account there. Deputy Gardner was right to spot it. Deputy Gardner was right to spot it. I hadn't spotted this. She's right to try and address it, but actually, I can't go with the Minister on this because I don't think Deputy Gardner's proposition goes far enough. But it's better than the ministers, so therefore I'll support it. Thank you, Mon.
Thank you, Deputy. There was a slight noise to my left. I'm not sure. That's a good contribution to the charities appeal. Thank you, Conatab. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Tadier.
It's just very quickly to say that if the new Alliance Party get their way and everybody is living in high-rise flats, certainly if the poor are all crammed into a Nelson Mandela House, Peckham-style high-rise, and certainly I'm not sure if that's Deputy Asher's wish, but it's certainly he'll get the reference. I think we need to make it a 5-minute walk or 500 metres, because if you're at the top of one of those iconic tower blocks and the lift isn't working, it may well take you 5 minutes to get down to the ground anyway. And you might find that you're living half a kilometre up in the sky. And I wouldn't want the only green space to be the stairwell, which has ingeniously been painted green, so that they can at least have some green open space on the way down from the top. Although I'm sure, of course, the top floors will be reserved for super rich people to help make these developments viable, even though they don't live there and maybe don't even come to the island. So, yeah, absolutely. You shouldn't compare children and dogs, sir. It's a dangerous step to make. And so I only have a fur baby at the moment, but I can appreciate even from that perspective. I remember being in Sand Street once, and I've got a very well-trained dog, and he likes to find patches of grass. And I remember thinking to myself, where's the nearest patch of grass from Sand Street? And I had to walk up to Snow Hill so that he could find relief, sir. And even at Snow Hill, that can by no means be said to be an open, it's not a park. There's a very tatty patch of grass behind a bus stop next to some seagull-infested wheelie bins, which seem to always be full. He doesn't mind, though, because it was better than the men's toilets at Snow Hill. And the point I make is that if we're just talking about finding a scrap of grass for a canine to relieve himself, how much more important is it that in the town centre or wherever it is, that we have suitable and adequate spaces for our children to play as they should need to in an increasingly busy town. And there should be, I am concerned about these planning obligations, because it shouldn't be simple enough just to say, I'll give some money to this fund so that somewhere along the line you can help put whatever. And it could just be something like a bench in a park. It could be a swing somewhere which has no direct relevance to the development in question. So yes, I suspect this isn't going to solve everything, but certainly it is damage limitation, and I welcome the proposition also.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Guida.
Ma'am, I think we need to actually read policy CI8. First thing that the second thing that it says is that development proposals providing more than 10 family homes are required to provide appropriate communal space for play on site. So that's new. That's actually something that we didn't do before. And that will be a new requirement of the development of all those new homes that we're absolutely so desperate to have. So that's one more hurdle to jump for the people who want to do those developments. I agree with the Deputy that this is an important development, and it's quite right that this should be in the island plan, but it's a new one. It's yet one more hurdle. Now, if you build more than 10 family homes, your site is probably big enough to have a play area, so you'll just have to sacrifice a little bit of space. But the same paragraph actually says development proposals providing between 5 to 10 family homes are required to provide appropriate communal space to play on site where possible, or otherwise make a contribution within 10 minutes or 1,000 meters. Now, again, if I remember the earlier days of this debate, building new homes is our number one goal. This island plan, very, very large part of this island plan is about taking care of the housing crisis, about building new homes. So we do have to be a little bit careful about how many hurdles we put in the path of those homes being realized. Now, if I'm building 5 homes on a site, and I need to sacrifice 1 for a play space, it's not unreasonable in terms of, yes, you need to provide play space, but it's 20% of the development. It's 1/5 of the development. It's very, very difficult. And now, if you need to find the same space within 500 meters, you're faced, and I'm sorry, I cannot show you that, but members will have their phones and their computers, and they could just have a little look at Google Earth and images of Saint-Hélier. If I found a space for 5 homes or small apartment buildings with 5 apartments in it in Saint-Hélier, it is extremely unlikely that I will find 500 square meters elsewhere to do a play space. Certainly not within 500 meters. In fact, even if I had the money and I was ready to do it, I'm pretty sure it would be quite impossible. So this is the art of the possible. So that, we can dream, we can think of what would be best, but it's the art of the possible. Can we actually build those homes? Can we put developers in a situation where they'll be happy bringing bricks and laying bricks and building those homes that we so need? And we do have to be careful when we ask them for the extra stuff. Yes, it's important, but it must remain within the realm of possible. If I'm building 5 homes and I'm being asked to find another 500 square meters within 500 meters of my site, I'm sorry, but in Saint-Hélier that does not exist. That is not possible. That is just impossible. So, again, I think the island plan is going quite far in bringing in those new requirements, those new hurdles, important ones, to building homes. But if we completely close them, if we make it impossible, we won't get those new homes. Thank you, ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, then I call upon Deputy Gardner to reply.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who contributed. I'll start with last speaker, Deputy Guida. I am welcoming these adjustments to the Regional Island Plan. And one thing I would say, it's not that for me personally, it's not about that we can dream. For me, we must have a dream and make it possible in slow but practical way. This is why my amendment is not going far enough, because I try to be practical and I try to stick with the benchmark that we adopted. As Deputy Water, Deputy Morel actually said together about it, I would suggest that we would just meet our previous target that we never met, 39% from our previous target. It's really far away. It's a safeguard to not find ourselves in a worse situation. And the Deputy of St. Martin is correct. It's so unclear, and the Deputy Ward made a point, and Deputy Tadia, 5 meters, 10 meters, 1 kilometer. At the end of the day, we need playgrounds in proximity. And I'm thinking about myself when I was working full-time, running two businesses with little child, and maybe I had a half an hour to go with her and play outside. And for me, to walk 20 minutes and play 10 minutes, or to walk 10 minutes and play 20 minutes, it's huge, huge difference. It was raised how we will find space in Saint-Hélier, how it will be done. I want to bring members' attention to something else, and I'm sure everyone will have this example in their head. We are all talking about building communities. How you build communities? When you live at the estate, and sometimes I judge people living in the estates because children in the estate have their own place, have their own games, they have their own space. And in my district, in District 3 and 4 Saint-Hélier, we have two Andium developments. And by the way, I have to say, Andium, they do great job. It's hardly you can find Andium development without a play area. They're different. If somebody visited Jardin de Carré, the play area there may be 5 by... It's on the corner where you cannot put the house. It was adapted, and it's a small play area, which is really well used by everyone on this estate. Parents don't need to drive, and they just come back home, cook, and see their children at the area. And we have Pondon Farm, which is bigger estate, and they have a bigger play area, and everyone uses it, and it's great. So it's not about to have a first-class play area. It's to have a play area to play, and as quick as possible. And if somebody can tell me here that we don't need more play areas in St. Helier, I will be really surprised. This amendment is just trying to, we're talking about part A and B. From what I've heard through the debate and from the minister, the people are more content with the part C and D. But this amendment basically saying if you cannot provide, but you need to try harder. Another argument that I would like to bring, and this is interesting, came to me when I was drafting my amendment about accessibility to historic buildings. And I tried to put amendment which would go far enough, and I'm sure that it wouldn't be accepted, but it was accepted. And the conversation that I have with the minister and with the officers, they say we need to make architects work harder to find the solution for accessibility to the historic buildings. So we don't want this to be too relaxed, that it's easy to get through and destroy historic steps to put a lift, because there are options, and if they worked really, really hard, they can find a solution, or they can present us why it's impossible and we need to make a decision. What's interesting here, and by the way, I agreed with the rule and I brought my amendment with this understanding that architects and designers need to work harder to provide a playground within 500 meters, this or that way, swings, seesaws, or whatever. What I'm trying to say, they will need to work harder. So why we're asking them to work harder on historic buildings, but we're happy to sign off playgrounds? And this amendment actually reinforced the terms of Article 2 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, that children's rights should be applied to all children without discrimination, and the children of St. Helier should have no less right to access to play spaces as children in any other places. And there are two rights, children rights, right to play as sleep as in it, it's equal, and right to access to the play areas. I think if we would be meeting targets in the previous years, we wouldn't need to discuss 1,000 meters, but because we didn't manage to meet our 500 meters, let's just create bigger the target. So I'm asking members to support my amendment. I do believe we just need to put extra framework, safeguard, and if it can be proved that it's impossible, they will work a bit harder, designers, architects, and planners, they can show, and they have an option. It's not restricted. It's allowing them to work harder and prove it to us. And ask for the appel A and B together and C and D together, please.
Very well. The appel is called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting.
Sorry, ma'am.
Are you able to provide the clarification? Sorry, Deputy.
Yes,
I should have come to you earlier.
puzzled. I thought the Deputy was content that I'd accepted C and D. But do I get it right that the Deputy is forcing a debate on the whole?
No, sir. A and B, one vote. C and D, separate vote.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very well. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber for part A and B. Full members have had an opportunity to cast their votes. I'm going to ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that parts A and B have been adopted. There were 25 votes for and 13 votes contre.
We have the 13, please.
Greffier.
Members voting contre, Senator Pallett, the Connétable of St Brelard and St Ouen, the deputies of St Martin and St Ouen, deputies Young, Guida, the deputy of Trinity and deputy Ayer, and then in the chat, Senator Lefondre, deputy Ash, the deputy of St Peter and deputy Perchard.
Very well. Then we move to parts C and D. Again, those joining us in the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. Full members have had an opportunity to cast their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment has been carried. 38 votes for, unanimous votes. So we move on to the 96th Amendment, Travel and Transport Policies Consolidated, and lodged by the Minister for the Environment, and ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words, except that, A, in the preamble to Policy TT1, Integrated Safe and Inclusive Travel, 1, in the first paragraph under the heading Jersey Mobility Hierarchy on page 251, after the words different modes of travel, there should be inserted the words access to travel and transport is also affected by other forms of disability and not just those related to mobility and sensory impairment. And 2, in the second paragraph, after the words all users of the development, there should be inserted the words including those of people with all forms of disability. B. In Policy TT1, Integrated Safe and Inclusive Travel, Section 2A, after the words sensory or mobility impairments, there should be inserted the words and other forms of disability. C. In the first paragraph of the preamble to Proposal 27, Active Travel Network, page 253, after the words islanders of all abilities, there should be inserted the words including people with disabilities. D. In Proposal 27, Active Travel Network, after the words the relevant parishes, stakeholders, there should be inserted the words including the disability inclusion group. E. In policy TT4, provision of off-street parking, in the first paragraph, after the words convenient off-street, the words motor vehicle should be substituted for the word car, and a new paragraph at the end of policy TT4 should be inserted as follows. 1. Development involving the loss of front gardens and their boundary features to provide parking with direct access to from the highway will not be supported where this would harm the character and appearance of the street scene or compromise highway safety. F. In policy H2, housing density, after the third bullet point there should be inserted an additional bullet point. The quantity and quality of amenity space and parking, including visitor parking. And G. In proposal 29, sustainable transport zones, after the words including residential, there should be inserted the words to meet all users' needs, including those of visitors.
Minister.
Thank you, ma'am. We're now on to section 10 of the plan, travel and transport, and this is the first of 3 debates. I'm hoping this one is very short, non-controversial, and in parallel with all of the other approaches I've taken, brought forward a consolidating amendment to start the debate of each section, which picks up upon all of the specific comments which were received during consultation, which are worthy of adoption, and then responses to member amendments which have arisen, and in this case, Deputy Gardner, the Conitable of St Helier, and Deputy Masson, and also what the planning inspectors had to say. So we've got a multi-part amendment, A through G, just basically summing up number A and B, talk about the whole question, or what's called a preamble to the policy, which is the words that really kind of explain what the policies are trying to do. That's TT1. And then we go on to what's called the, TT1 is about safe and inclusive travel. And then on to we get to proposal 27, which is to do with what is a section called active travel network. And so amendments C and D deal with that. And that deals with the points being raised by Deputy Gardner in her Amendment 21, which makes sure that the plan makes explicit and enough reference to disability inclusion. And then we come to item E in the amendment, which is about off-street parking, and a minor revision to the policy in the draft plan to replace the word car with motor vehicle, which seems to be self-explanatory. And then adding a provision which is brought in that seeks to prevent the loss of front gardens, people's front gardens of houses from parking development. And then under F, we have a policy in relating to housing density and the need to explicitly consider parking provision. And this amendment to the policy accepts Part A of Amendment 42 from the Conitable of St Helier and adds in some additional clarification to that. Last part, item G, which is sustainable transport zones, and in relation to visitor parking. The draft plan, this is a proposal, the draft plan already sets out a proposal for comprehensive parking standards to be reviewed, an issue that will set standards for all users in future, and that will give emphasis to the specific needs of visitor parking to be addressed in those parking standards. This and explicit references visitor parking on the face of proposals, and that sets out where the parking standards to be reviewed. So proposal 29. And this also relates directly to Deputy Masson's Amendment 76, Part B, visitor parking, to ensure that visitor parking is given greater emphasis. It is best for him to, we believe, to focus our efforts to secure appropriate visitor parking through engagement with the supplementary planning guidance on visitor parking. And of course, that's the key thing. And I should say, members will of course know, this area of transport policy is not my area of great expertise. And I know there's a number of members in the Assembly much more clued up than I. So I find myself in the messenger bringing together these elements. It's a complex amendment, but obviously I will do my best to facilitate if members want to raise questions. But I think we have got a number of issues still to debate to follow, which I think will probably pick up any areas of members' concern. But obviously that's what one seeks to do, is to deal with all the things which I consider are straightforward at the moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification. I believe the deputy is Mallard. Has somebody been nominated to take Amendment 76, or does that fall away?
We'll get to that when we're due, Deputy, but at the moment, no, we've had no forewarning that Deputy Masson wished for somebody else to take the proposition, and he should have done so by 9:30 this morning, so it would fall away.
Would it be all right in order for me to say, Madam, that my references to that was simply to refer to the parts of Deputy Masson's amendment that I've brought forward into this amendment and therefore accepted.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes.
Does anybody wish to speak on the amendment? Oh, sorry, the Conataba of St Brelard.
Thank you, Mum. And I just stand briefly just to give support to this amendment, and particularly the TT4 and, well, E and F, I suppose, because from a parish point of view, we have no end of trouble with visitor parking and what I might call car spillage into the public realm. There is a perception from some that they have a God-given right to a parking space in the public realm, and this causes enormous difficulties. And in planning applications, my roads committee will very often look at these issues and comment on the effects of the surrounding neighbourhood with developments where inadequate parking is provided for not only the residents but for the visitors as well. So I'm happy that the Minister's brought this and will be supporting it. Thank you, Ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wishes to speak on this amendment, then I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, ma'am. I was just checking. I apologise, as I did say it wasn't my area. I was just checking what's in progress in this sustainable transport policy that we're working on. No, this is a standalone. And so if members have issues about parking standards, which I'm absolutely sure they do, the advice I'm going to give is that please, we don't think, or recommendation is, that the way to do that is not through the policies, but through the workings of the supplementary planning guidance, which is the task that would follow after the policy is adopted, to try and work out all the fine detail about those policies. And I have to say, past attempts at trying to produce the supplementary planning guidance on parking have been horrendously difficult and complex. Nonetheless, we have to do it. We have to get a clearer set of guidance in place. But sorry, ma'am, I may have missed a question if there was one from the Conitaba or other speakers. If there was no question, ma'am, I put the proposition and asked for the appeal.
While the appeal is called for, members return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have now had an opportunity to cast their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. can announce that the amendment has been adopted unanimously. There were 40 votes in favour. Next is the 42nd Amendment, which has been lodged by the Conotab of St Helier. Before we start, Conotab, Part A of this amendment falls because of the adoption by the Assembly of Part F of the previous proposition. Are you content that it's read without Part A?
Thank you, ma'am. And in order to be helpful, could I suggest it's read without Part B as well, just Part C? Thank you, sir.
Very well, then I ask the greffier to read the proposition without Part A or B.
After the words, the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25, insert the words, except that, in policy TT4, provision of off-street parking in the third paragraph, for the words after the word supported, there should be substituted the words, unless the new spaces will be provided for the use of residents, shoppers and visitors.
Conotab.
Thank you, ma'am. The reason I'm not going to suggest we have a lengthy debate on whether policy should be published or brought to the Assembly for approval is that I think we could spend an hour on that and I'll probably lose it, and I'm really conscious that time is of an essence. In the past, certainly, and I've amended numerous states' plans with respect to parking and other transport matters, and without wanting to sound too much like Deputy Ward earlier today, it really doesn't make any difference. These things are accepted or not. They're normally accepted. Nothing changes. Planning decisions are still made, which go completely fly in the face of commitments to preserve parking facilities. And I've lost count of the number of times people have contacted me to say, I've just had an application turned down by planning for some off-street parking. Can we see the parking guidelines? I say, well, there are parking guidelines, but they've never really been debated. Coincidentally, I had an email this morning, which I think was copied to the Minister, but it may not have been, about just saying, wondering if there's been any progress with the parking review. This is my reply. Thank you for your email. Alas, we haven't had anything from the Minister for Infrastructure on parking, walking, cycling, or anything much besides. Depressingly, the previous Minister 4 years ago promised to deliver these strategies before the end of his term of office, and he didn't achieve it either. What a deplorable state of affairs. And I went on a bit longer to try and provide some optimism that hopefully the new government will actually deal with these matters in a slightly more timely manner than past ones. And I know the Minister of Infrastructure has had a lot on his plate. I don't mean to criticise him. COVID, of course, has taken its toll on the ability of ministers to apply officer time onto these matters. Ma'am, the only thing I really want a debate about today, and hopefully a favourable decision about, is paragraph C, and that really addresses the fact that we are being told by the planners that we are not allowed to have any more off-street car parks. And I think that is simply wrong. Because however many people switch, and it's happening really fast in Jersey, however many people switch from hydrocarbon-powered cars to electric and other forms of power, people are still going to be using cars in Jersey in the years to come. And as the population increases, even if quite a few of those people see the merits of doing without a car or doing without some of their cars and switching to healthier modes of transport, there's still going to be an awful lot of people hunting for parking spaces. And we have a situation in town now where someone complained to me the other day that they'd come into town for a meal in one of our fabulous restaurants, and they drove around and around, couldn't find any on-street parking. In the end, they had to go to Pier Road. Well, members might think that's not particularly inconvenient, but the fact of the matter is that our car parks, even in the evenings, are getting full. Minden Place is impossible to use most of the time, and I know the Arts Centre suffers from people being unable to get to performances because they can't park in the car park right next to the facility. We recently had an application for Havre de Pau, which is one of the areas in St Helier most short of parking, and someone wanted to have a small off-street car park created probably not forever, but just certainly for the time being, and it was turned down by planning. I think that's wrong. I think we should be able to put these spaces to good use because people, as I say, are going to need places to park, and particularly our visitors, particularly shoppers. And one of the big battles we have, as members will know, in terms of promoting St Helier as a retail destination, is that people say, well, I can never park. And I don't want to rule out the possibility that at some point in the future, it may be necessary for us to create some off-street car parking, possibly in a combination with some accommodation as well. So it needn't be a standalone car park. There could be a car park with other things going on. And that's the reason for my wanting to maintain this amendment, Ma'am. I think it is important that we keep that door open. I look forward to members' comments. Thank you.
Ma'am, may I have a point of clarification?
Are you willing to give
Yes, of course.
point of clarification?
Just clarification on what the constable's proposition, the consequences of it, because he's replacing something, and please stop me if I'm wrong, Ma'am, or someone can. He's replacing would not be accepted except where it's provisioned as meanwhile use against time frames as short stay shopper park, with a phrase that effectively says, unless the new spaces will be provided for the use of residents, shoppers and visitors, i.e. everybody. So effectively he's replacing the bit that limits the parking to just parking for anybody. Would I be right in interpreting it that way? Because I think it's quite important that we know what we're talking about here. Thank you, Ma'am.
If I can clarify, certainly the thrust of this amendment is about not creating private off-street commuter car parks. That's certainly what I believe the planners are most keen to discourage. It used to happen, but I don't think there's much case for it. This is to make sure that people who are not commuters can still park if they're coming to town to do their business. The removal of the word meanwhile, I think, is it's a relatively new term that's come into the planning, into the Island Plan. I wasn't quite sure what its import was, but no doubt the Minister will explain that when he speaks.
Is the amendment seconded? Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Young.
I think I think rather than hold back and have a long debate, I think I try and clarify why the advice on this particular point C is to resist the Constable's amendment. And I think what the planners, the advice that I'm given, is that the interpretation the planning officers have put on that is that it seeks to allow the provision of private off-street car parks as a development in their own right. That's what it seeks to do. That's their view of it, in the wording of it. And of course, what we are seeking to amend here is policy TT4, a policy which deals with off-street car parking and is subject to this amendment, to ensure that that happens only where it's for a temporary period. I think the word meanwhile is another word for interim use or what have you. It's a posh word, I don't know where it came from, but it means interim use because obviously where there are long-term planning proposals for land, which are going to take a while to be able to design, implement, what have you, then an interim or a temporary interim use would be acceptable. And also the criteria in the policy that it would deal with short-term shopper car parking, which I think is, really pretty crucial to the whole town centre. Of course, having what the planners take the view that we don't want to encourage people necessarily to be able to drive around town because unnecessarily we get noise, we get air pollution, we get conflict with pedestrians and erosion of the quality of experience in the town. And of course the other thing is using land on a permanent ongoing basis for an efficient, for parking of cars is not really an efficient one of land use. And of course that's particularly noticeable where you get surface car parks. And obviously we are, the policies seek to us use land to provide homes and open spaces for people to enjoy where it's possible, which we've discussed, and community infrastructure that we've already discussed. And of course, cars is unfortunately a very, very, I mean, they really do have a big impact on on the way land is used. And of course, where we have such a shortage of land in Jersey, we are, we can't, it's really very difficult to get family homes in town with, as we've discussed. Now, a couple of things I'm asked to point this out, and I will, and it's not a complaint about the Conitar, but I'm struggling to believe how this amendment, which is a very short one, and whether the intentions behind it could have the effect of the very thing which earlier on we were talking about. I think the Conitar mentioned the Royal Crescent being used as a private car park. Now, what I'd like to hear from the Constable is he advocating we go to that, or is he maintaining that that's not a good thing? So I think I'm puzzled, I'll be honest. So, and I think the officers are puzzled because it does look to be contradictory. And of course, we have also we've made decisions now that we aren't going to develop land on the edge of St Helier with one exception. So we do have to make use of what we've got. And so trying to, for example, in that case, developing that for housing would be, in principle, I think, a good thing. So the draft plan seeks to ensure, in a nutshell, the development of new on-street car parking where it is not related, this is the key thing, where it is not related to a development, standalone if you like, standalone parking, is limited to interim or short-term uses for land which is temporarily available, or for short-stay shopper parking. So I think I accept the fact that maybe I've not understood the full import of the Conitar's short 4-line amendment, but it does seem to be, unless the new spaces will be provided for the use of residents, shoppers, well, we've got shoppers and visitors, but I suppose it's the residents bit. So is this what the Constable is seeking to do? The planning inspectors, of course, considered this, and I can't remember if the Conitar went to the planning inquiry and spoke about it. Presumably he explained it in great length and made his case. But of course the planning inspectors concluded, it says that the amendment to policy TT4 that seeks to allow additional off-street parking in town for residents and shoppers is a matter that should be dealt with in a comprehensive play in the parking plan work stream. And I'm pleased to say to the Assembly that I'm thankful that job is not mine. And it is trying to find the wisdom of Solomon, if that's allowed to say, to find that way through that. But I think this is definitely a piece of work that needs to be done in great detail, with a lot of input, with a lot of consultation, and with stakeholders. And at the moment, I think it's probably, and it's not the way, and I would recommend against just making a change of words now, which would dramatically affect the way planning decisions would go virtually from next week if this plan is approved. I would advocate against that. Do it in a structured way through supplementary planning guidance when the work is in progress. And that would be my advice, Madam.
May I thought perhaps I might seek permission to withdraw the amendment to save time, and I can see we could go around in circles for some time. I know Deputy Lewis may want to come back after what I said, but I'm quite happy to withdraw the amendment with the Assembly's permission. Thank you.
Well, you'll need to seek the leave of the Assembly. If a member's content to do that by a standing vote, to believe they are, then the amendment has been duly withdrawn. The next item on the agenda is Amendment 76, which has been lodged by Deputy Masson. Deputy Masson was malade this morning, and we have not been given the requisite notice by 9:30 this morning that he wished to have somebody else act as rapporteur. So accordingly, 76 falls. So the next item on the agenda will be the 97th Amendment, Safeguarding Mineral Sites, the Simon Sand and Gravel. which has been lodged by the Minister for the Environment, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words "the draft Island Plan 2022 to 25," insert the words, "except that A. On page 303, after the words "the facility would continue to operate as a result of exhausting the mineral reserve," the whole of the paragraph that begins "in terms of securing a supply of sand for the island" should be replaced with the following paragraphs. Having regard to the need and desirability to reduce dependency on more expensive and less sustainable import options, it is considered appropriate to safeguard the remaining existing local reserves of sand, where they remain within the existing boundaries of the Simon Sand and Gravel Quarry site, to enable their potential extraction. Any proposal for further extraction here will, however, be subject to a full environmental impact assessment as an integral part of a planning application, which would need to address all relevant issues, including the potential existence of land contamination and any hydrogeological implications of further extraction, along with the restoration of the site. Continued extraction will be conditional upon the provision of appropriate environmental mitigation measures and the agreement and commencement of a phased restoration plan for the whole quarry site, to be secured through a planning obligation agreement. Restoration, where it involves the importation of material onto the site, should be undertaken using clean, inert material from natural sources as far as possible and practicable. B. In policy MW1, after the words "proposals for the extension of extraction beyond the boundaries of the words "existing consented area" under RC 2018-0816 at Simon Sand and Gravel, St Brillard St Peter, should be replaced with the words "safeguarded mineral sites."
Minister.
Sorry, man, I tried to switch myself to a completely different mode, but I will try. And I think we're on, unless I'm mistaken, we're on pretty well the last lap, which is really good news. This section is minerals, mineral extraction and solid waste. And this is I would hope, the easier of the debates, two debates that we're likely to have. This is about the safeguarding sand and gravel extraction in St Juan's Bay. Members, I think, will know. I'll probably just summarise a little bit of the history of how we got here today. Is that the draft island bridging plan, as published and that went to the inquiry, maintains the policy position that was agreed in the 2011 island plan, i.e. that they're not to support the continued extraction of sand in the sensitive landscape setting of St Juan's Bay, which of course is in the Coastal National Park, and specifically not to allow the continuation of Simon Sand and Gravel Quarry. And that plan, based on the 2020 Minerals Strategy, set a time limit of 2018 to that extraction, and that was extended by planning consents to 2023 within the boundaries of the existing site. And as part of the work on the Bridging Island Plan, a study was done. We asked Arup to do that for us, looking at the whole issues of mineral waste and water. And they recommended that given the remaining reserve that might resist on land within and adjacent to the quarry operations, that the site might continue to be used and extended for further on-island extraction. And it might also serve as an integrated extraction, waste management and restoration site. And this work, as part of consideration of options, also identified there were alternative sources of supply alternatives to on-island production, involving the use of recycled aggregates, which is proving to be very successful, and some importation of sand into the island through our ports. And of course, that has happened, that following the cessation of the production of the quarry, which was a decision made by the owner in 2021 this year, the island has relied upon the use of recycled aggregates as a substitute for sand, and arranged for bulk importation, being managed by two local quarry operators in association with, I think I'm allowed to mention the name of the operator, ma'am, AA Longwilds. They provided a valuable service to the island. And sand has thus been continued to be available, but of course it is a fact that the price has now increased. So I actually concluded that that my decision in the draft plan in going to the inquiry was that the local environmental implications of more sand extraction as the ones outweighed the benefits of on-island production, and therefore I took the position with the inspector that extraction should cease. Obviously, there were alternative views from that. I think I'm probably correctly quoting the Environment Scrutiny Panel. I think expressed the view. I can't remember how firmly that was put, but certainly it was a subject of debate with the panel. And I think the panel did meet the owner, and indeed the owner attended at the inquiry and made their case. And the independent planning inspectors, they gave this very thorough consideration, recommended to me as Minister that I reconsider my position on the draft plan. And the recommendations that I look at the potential for further sand extraction on land within the existing, and this is important, in the existing sand quarry boundary. But, of course, and there's very clear about that, is at the moment planning permission to extract further sand is not currently in place. And so I thought, having studied, I considered the wider sustainability issues about bringing in aggregates, and that obviously deals with the whole question of carbon impact of increased transport costs and carbon impact and so on. And also the issue of the inconsistency, and I have to be blunt about this, the inconsistency of my approach to that which I was taking regarding crushed rock, which is we will go on to debate regarding the other quarry, and then of course the issue of cost on the industry. The inspectors took the view that the land in St Wands Bay is of little scenic value. They say it's got significant overburden from earlier workings. That means the land's been reworked, it's not sort of untouched sand, and it's largely covered in brambles. So it is a very disturbed landscape. Having thought about it and weighed it all up, I did believe that I needed to reconsider the issue. Obviously, a number of things have changed. The need to give emphasis to the wider environment costs of importing raw materials, and there is a greater awareness of the need to the cost implications. And so I think it's appropriate for the new bridging plan to enable the extraction of sand reserves at Simon Sands during the bridging plan period. But a number of important elements I believe should be applied to that recommendation, and those are set out in detail in the amendment I've lodged. First of all, the extraction should be only within the existing safeguarded mineral sites and subject to a number of environmental considerations. And I would flag up at this stage, there was considerable opposition to me doing this from the National Trust of Jersey, and I think probably other members may hold to that view, we'll find in this debate. Obviously I had to give into account how we mitigate and deal with those environmental matters. And so it will need, if sand extraction is to continue, and of course it will need a future planning consent, that will be subject to a comprehensive and thorough assessment of all the environmental implications as required by an environmental impact, which is a statutory requirement because such a development is laid down in supplementary legislation as it's mandatory. And that would have to include any potential for contamination at the site. And I got no evidence of this, but I've asked a bit of research as to establish whether or not there is any historical previous use as a dump or rubbish, because obviously that needs to be known before areas are opened up. Then the effect of hydrology, hydrogeology, because as members know, this site is slap bang on top of our underground water reserve, the Swans Bay Aquifer, where Jersey Water extract a certain amount of fresh water, not as much as they would like to, but we need to understand where what changes would happen by increasing the extracted area, what effect on groundwater, and then there's the effect on local ecology and archaeological resources. And I suppose the very most significant thing is that the site has always, since the States, it was a States decision that approved the extraction of sand in that site back in the 1970s. Back in the 1970s, I've checked back in the record. So it was that important that this was done. And they did a number of things. They identified the area, but absolutely they also put, not in their proposition, a requirement that there will be an arrangement in place to secure the restoration of the whole quarry site when it was worked out as a quarry. And I think there's a whole history about that, which is probably best not gone into now, because that all raises questions of whether or not planning conditions are complied with and so on, but the permissions up to now have had those as planning conditions, and I think that is a story for another day about that. But of course we know at the moment that we haven't seen that restoration take place throughout the decades, and it's only recently we started to have some information about what might be done. So this amendment, where I'm asking the states to change the draft plan, would make it subject to any extension is subject to an agreement and a planning obligation agreement for the phased restoration plan for the whole quarry site, and to start work on it. So not just a plan that doesn't go anywhere, but a commitment to starting it. And that's really, really important. Now that will require, so any extension of the quarrying activity will require a new restoration plan and a phasing and implementation of a legally binding planning obligation agreement. And without that, consent would not be coming. And of course, the thing about planning obligation agreements, they weren't available in the 1970s. And members at the time had to rely on planning conditions. And the case, and I would just mention this so it's important for the record, is that when the states approved that back in the 70s, they set a requirement that the developer, the operator of the quarry, set aside funds into a fund to allow restoration. It's a story for another day about whether or not such is in place, but nonetheless they did it, because now we have planning obligation agreements. And what that means is that any consent that is given subject to a planning obligation agreement means what it is. You sign a legal agreement, and that agreement runs with the land. It is attached to the land. So wherever the land ownership may or may not go in the future, that planning obligation condition will remain. And a planning obligation condition, if it's not fulfilled, then the minister, whoever they are, has power to step in and act as if they were the developer to fulfill the agreement and to recover the costs as a civil debt. So it's a very, very powerful provision. And so I think those are the conditions. They're very strong conditions, but they need to be, because this is a very, very special area. And I think we need to make sure that if we are to allow it to continue in the future, we look after it in a better way. So that is the reason for my amendment today. And I ask members please to support that amendment to change the draft plan. Thank you, Madam.
Is the amendment seconded? Deputy Sir Martin.
Thank you, Madam. I rise to support the Minister wholeheartedly in this. I'm a simple bloke from St Martin, but I've always looked upon this as quite a simple solution. as the Minister said, there's been rules in place, or certainly guidance in place, since the 1970s, and certainly more detailed since the 2011 Island Plan more than 10 years ago. And the reason I think this is simple, Ma'am, is because from what I can see, this is a win-win for the owner of the site. I just can't understand why what's in the proposition today hasn't already happened. I'm not going to play any blame game here, but it's clear to me, maybe I'm looking upon it too simply, that we can do both things that are proposed. The owner of the site can charge people to take sand away, and the owner of the site can charge people to bring him clean inert waste to put into the site to rejuvenate it. It's actually more than a win-win, because we can also do the following if we go with this amendment today, and just to keep it simple, sand out, there's something to be gained there, inert waste in, yes, there's something for the owner here, but there's also a benefit to us because we know that La Collette is now full. The entirety of La Collette is now becoming superfill. It's coming out of the ground. There's no more holes left to fill at La Collette, so there's an advantage to us there. There's going to be an advantage to the environment because the plan approved, the plan that would have to be approved would be great for wildlife. And depending what happens in negotiations with the owner, there may be an advantage as a tourist attraction or local attraction. There are fantastic opportunities to do fantastic things on the site. And I urge anybody who's involved with it, most especially the owner, to get on board with this amendment, which I hope we're going to approve today. The things we can do down there are really, really, really good, not just for us, but to the environment. And I urge members to vote in favour and just get on and start sorting this out.
Senator Telefondre.
It's a minor matter, Mum. Just to note that I beneficial owner of land pretty well adjacent to the site that we're talking about. Although there's no direct financial interest in anything along those lines, I think I'd be better off just abstaining on this matter, Mum. That's all.
That's noted. Does any other member wish to speak? Conatop of St Brelard.
Thank you, Ma'am. From the wearing the scrutiny panel hat, we were invited to the site and looked over it some weeks ago, and it is an enormous site, no question about that. And the history was explained, and of course we've got a situation, Ma'am, where the goalposts have changed. And the reason I say that is because the owner had obligations in the past. He had plans to what to put in place once the extraction had been completed. There is a large lake, which members will see on the plans. But of course, that has had to be changed through influences beyond the owner's control. Effectively, he proposed to have a lake for fishing, water sports, and so on. But that has proved to be impossible due to the pollution from PFAS in the aquifer. This has come from the airport over past years, and there's not a lot that he can do about it. So his original plans, truthfully, have been scuppered. He will need to produce new plans, and the thought now is to fill part of the lake in with inert waste, as has been referred to earlier, and that seems to be a sensible solution. What I'm suggesting to the Minister, and I will be supporting the amendment, I think we have to work backwards on this one. We have to decide what will be acceptable at the end of the extraction period. Government needs to work with the owner to agree what needs to be achieved, because otherwise we could well end up in the same situation that we have at the moment. And I have to say it's not something I don't think government should be proud of. There is some years of extraction to go. We need to take advantage of that, enable the owner to wind it down in a proper manner and put funds aside to its redevelopment. So to conclude, once again, I would repeat, let's work backwards on this one. Let's decide what we want at the end of the period, get it agreed with the owner, get it written down and agreed, and with whichever obligations the Minister decides is most appropriate, and deal with this in a fair and proper manner. Thank you, Ma'am.
Constable of St Peter.
Thank you.
and I will also be supporting the Minister. But I speak about the area where extraction may take place. And I certainly saw some documentation going back, I think, to the 1980s, where previous government departments had identified it as an area where extraction could take place and had actually given a date after which extraction would be allowed. So I'm happy enough that extraction would continue there, but like the Minister, I've heard these rumours that potentially it was a rubbish dump at one stage, and again, I've got no proof of that, but if that is the case, then there is the possibility of pollution from that refuse. So any extraction, tests have got to be done prior to that to establish exactly what is under the first layer of sand. And the other thing is, of course, is the restoration, and I think that's the one area where I have had contact from parishioners who are quite concerned that although the parish, although the sand quarry is currently closed, there is actually no evidence at all of any restoration ever having taken place. And that is of great concern. And I appreciate what my colleague, the Constable of St Brelade, said, that the owner has had some problems with his original plan, but those were well known about some years ago. And yet there is no evidence of any restoration. And so if we permit further extraction of sand, then there has to be something that's legally binding in respect of restoration of the whole site. I think that, that is an absolute must. But other than that, I am happy to support the Minister. Thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy St Peter.
Yes, ma'am, and I am equally happy to support this. It is in my parish. I'd just like to draw members to the financial and manpower implications, which said there aren't any, and I think I'd like to remind members of the poisoning of PFOS, which is all over that particular area, and warn that the removal of that might involve some government support going forward. So I'm not making that as a commitment or something that has to happen, but I just think we ought to be aware of it. Thank you, ma'am.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wishes to speak, then I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm really grateful for the members who spoke, because I think they all are cognizant of the very complex technical and issues, and also, I suppose, some of the political aspects of it as well, because this is very much a high-profile matter. I think starting with the Deputy of St Martin, I think probably I should have mentioned in my speech, I didn't mention it, but I will do. Under the last part of Part A of my proposition, where we refer to the infill material, because there isn't any doubt that there needs to be material imported into that site. But of course here we have, I think it's a very important site with environmental risks, and therefore with the advice of the technical officers, who are the qualified waste management officers, those of a scientific background, the recommendation they put to me, and the words are here, that any material imported into the site has to be undertaken using, and these are their words, using clean, inert material from natural sources as far as possible and practicable. And I think that doesn't mean rubbish, just to be clear. So I think I wanted to do that, but the Deputy of St Martin is absolutely right. And I believe that is a practical proposition, because there are such sources available. I know where they are, but I think it would be premature for me to say so here at the moment. Constable St Brelade, it is absolutely true that when the back in the 70s, when the restoration was allowed, obviously the area being spoken out was minuscule compared to what it is now, what it's become. And so there was indeed talk of a nice lake, fishing, and so on, in kind of very, very lovely sort of Walt Disney type world that we could have this. But of course, that didn't happen. It is a fact, as the Deputy of Peter say, that there has been, I think there has been the restoration that's happened is the build-up of the banking, or what you would call the bunding, around the site to screen it from views. That's it. That does not include any restoration, which means that refilling what you've taken out and restoring the landform. That is standard provision in all mineral workings, that there needs to be some arrangement for restoration in place. So the original plans, frankly, I think just really became completely, utterly out of date, frankly irrelevant, because of the change, the vast increase in the area. We've seen all sorts of things happen at that time. The incident that Deputy St Peter referred to about PFOS contamination in that area was not known. Also, probably the degree of air travel and the issue about the risk of bird strikes and so on was not known. And I think our environmental understanding of how one looks after the area was not known. And so there is no question we have needed an updated plan for a long time, a very long time, decades. And I know that lots of efforts have been achieved trying to get to that point. But only recently there have been some ideas come forward. But the ideas put forward so far, I think this has come up in scrutiny hearings. So just for it's been raised by the CONITAB. The proposals have not been accepted. They go beyond restoration and they involve effectively a new use, and that has been indicated that the applicant would need to make a new planning application. At the moment, for that to happen, that has not happened. So I think that deals with the Constable St Peter's restoration issues. I'm afraid I can't help him with the issue of rumours. I have had been, if you like, be frank, I've heard those rumours, but I have to accept the owner drew my attention to the fact that they're rumours. And so therefore, I have asked for the work to be done to see, from the officers, to see what evidence they can find historically, which would either confirm or deny that they're just Spanish stories, as we know in Jersey. Maybe, I don't know what the Jersey word for Spanish stories is, man, but there must, I'm sure. I'll look at the linguists, my linguist colleagues. Deputies of Peters, I've tried to avoid overcomplicating it with the issue of PFOS, but the Deputy, of course, knows there's a separate piece of work which is funded to investigate that, because we don't know enough where that is, and we don't know enough that anything can be done about it or not. But I think the one thing that we can't be thinking about is here's a nice lake for people to swim in, and so on. So I make the proposition, ma'am, if I could ask for the appeal.
The appeal has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. for us, if all members have had an opportunity to cast their votes, I'll ask the greffier to close the voting.
I can announce the amendment has been adopted. 38 votes pour with 1 abstention. I'll move on to the 20th amendment lodged by Senator Moore. I'll ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words "the draft island plan 2022 to 25," insert the words "except that A. Field MY966 La Gigalon Quarry, St Peter St Mary, should be removed from policy MW1. B. The draft island plan 2022 to 25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of A. And C. The draft bridging island plan proposals map Part A, planning zones, be amended to reflect the adoption of A.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. Sir, much debate time over the last 9 days has been spent discussing and protecting green fields and green space across our beautiful island. And this debate, I'm afraid, is really no different. In fact, in the words of the Farmers Union, this is one of the best fields for growing in the island. And I can say that indeed there were many items growing in the field when we went for a walk on Sunday to look at it and to also admire the ecology around the site, the many trees that are planted in the banks and hedgerows. And so, sir, also sitting high above a valley, it also has quite an impact in terms of the vista. It can be seen from a long distance. In fact, I think the Deputy of St Peter shared with members of the Assembly earlier this week a view from the fields, I think, surrounding his home when he was allowed out for a brief moment of respite during his day. And that showed exactly the importance of this site and the impact that it may have if quarrying is allowed to continue into this field. But, sir, of course, members will be mindful of the views of the inspectors and the need to ensure that we have sufficient aggregates in the island to continue building the much-needed homes that we hope to deliver for islanders now and into the future. Sir, I would like to remind members that despite the views of inspectors, there are, of course, alternatives. The Minister has, I'm very pleased to say, accepted amendments which endorse the use of alternative modern methods of construction, which move away from the need for aggregates. Also, he has accepted an amendment that allows for greater use of prefabricated building for the delivery of housing. So there are alternatives. And equally, we have another quarry which has significant space. It recently had a planning application to extend and expand its production, which will ensure its products for some years to come. And equally, there are reserves still in place in the current quarry, particularly underneath the plant. And also, sir, there is recycling available in the island now. And just this morning, I went along to La Collette to view a new recycling facility, which is turning rubble from building sites into both coarse and fine sand, as well as crushed rock of different varieties. And I have to say I was extremely impressed to see this in operation. and it appears that significant quantities of those aggregates will be delivered on a week-by-week basis from this enterprise, and that does not figure in the inspector's report. So it is a very important contributing factor when considering the needs for producing aggregates in the island. My report, which I hope members have had an opportunity to read, also covers the governance concerns about the consistent use of one company that have provided a number of background reports for the island and our government over a significant period of years, which perhaps has its risks. And so the mineral strategy and the underpinning report comes with somewhat of a mild health warning in terms of just awareness from members. I would ask them to consider that when they're taking into account any views that might be expressed from the Minister in this debate. But I think members are really quite familiar with this issue. It has captured most members' attention, I think, as we've built up to the debate this week. So I will leave it at that for the moment, and I move the amendment and look forward to debate.
Is amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to rise early. And I'm going to repeat myself from a previous amendment when I say that I ploughed and grew crops in this field. I know I said that when we were talking about the cricket field, but I've worked in this area as well, a considerable number of fields in this area. In fact, if members look at the overhead that they've been given, if you can imagine a field to the north of the one we're talking about, I ploughed and planted daffodils in that one as well, and it's no longer a field, it's now an enormous hole in the ground. But sir, I rise to just to put a little bit of clarity on this, and this is where I take, I want to take exception with Senator Moore. She says this is the best field on the island. Well, if you gave me a choice of fields and I'll look over to another ex-fellow farmer and say, where would you choose to have a field? It wouldn't be this one. This is a good field, but I think it's stretching it to say it's the best field on the island. But that's where my exceptions with the Senator stop. Because like a fortnight ago, I went to La Collette to see this new, quite fantastic piece of kit that's been put together, private enterprise piece of kit down at La Collette for recycling builders' waste. And it was put to me that we have a third quarry down at La Collette now, and naturally it's right, because they're putting rubble in at one end and getting product out at the other, the sort of product that you would buy from either this site or the other site on the north coast. It's clear to me, sir, that I think we need to start slowing down on taking bits of Jersey out of the ground. I'm not saying we can stop, but we need to start thinking about slowing down. We need to think about doing things slightly differently. Had I been the quarry, I think I would have approached this field in a very different way, but we are where we are. We have an application in front of us, and I'm going to vote with the Senator on this one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And before I begin my address, perhaps I could shed some light on the field and its suitability. I think the exact quote which I have here is, in simple terms, you don't find much better fields to farm in Jersey. So I hope that sort of is a compromise to both Senator Moore and the Deputy St Martin. I rise to make 2 points. The first relates to the actual safeguarding of the field, and the second to the extinguishment of the road, which will be necessary to, if the quarry were to be able to fulfil their plans. And as to the first point, so it's worth noting that the amendment put forward by Senator Moore and incidentally endorsed by 5 politicians at the time, says the following sites are designated as safeguarded mineral sites. And I emphasise the word safeguarded. perhaps as well, we are debating this particular matter at the end of this 2-week period, but we have in previous days looked at, in not so many words, safeguarding other sites. Yesterday, we, pursuant to Deputy Gardner's proposition, we safeguarded sites near primary schools. Pursuant to Deputy Ward's proposition, we safeguarded Gas Place and also another area, car park, to safeguard them against other development. But what are we safeguarding here? The stark position is, sir, that the field is already owned by the quarry. We have one planning authority on the island, which is the Environment Department, and there is no possible reason or cause why the site, now an agricultural field, should be used for anything else. Unlike the UK, where there are rival authorities wanting sites, that is not the case here. And in the Minister's report, which I'll quote from shortly, he does refer to that point. In the UK, there is there's a requirement to safeguard sites in this way. Jersey has no such requirement, although we appear to have adopted that practice. There's no legal obligation on us to safeguard sites. And I ask the question as to where does safeguarding get us? At the moment, we have numerous uncertainties around over this 3-year bridging period. The rate of extraction from the ground, the use of other building materials, the possibility of bringing in materials from outside, and various aspects. And surely, if there's no advantage in safeguarding the site now, we should wait. And when saying this, sir, I am mindful of the fact that safeguarding site is not, or should not be, equivalent to permission to develop. The policy MW1, in its final paragraph, says all proposals for extended mineral extraction sites must be accompanied by an environmental impact assessment and a comprehensive after-use site restoration plan. That is acknowledged by the quarry, sir. This site cannot be developed without the submission of a planning application, which itself must be supported by a detailed environmental impact assessment. So, at the moment, yes, certain comments have been made by various parties, but a detailed EIA would require much, much more. And the only advantage in giving this go-ahead to safeguarding at this stage is not for the island of Jersey, but for the benefit of the quarry, who would see it as a first step or a first foot in the door of getting planning consent in due course. That is the only advantage, and it does not, in the round, it does not advantage them either, because they, in the Minister's report, where I have it, he does acknowledge that such an assessment is necessary, but at the same time, if you forgive me, sir, yes, in justifying the reason why the quarry wants to proceed with this safeguarding now, the Inspector curiously says, if a decision about expansion were to be delayed, current extraction of the remaining permitted reserves along the eastern side of the quarry would have to cease in the near future. And that in itself denotes that this safeguarding, informal safeguarding, if this were to happen, is somehow going to be influential in the planning application as and when it comes. It should not be so. It cannot be, because there is not there the sufficient information. So I do revert to the basic point as to who benefits from this safeguarding other than the quarry. The island certainly does not. It is going to be no worse situation in 3 years' time, by which time, matters will be clear on a number of fronts, and the quarry is at liberty right now, if it wishes to proceed, to submit its application. So I now come on to the question of the extinguishment of the road. I have to say that I was, until I was put in my place by the Attorney General on this, I got quite excited about some of the provisions. The extinguishment has to be applied for by the Highway Authority, which in this case will be the Parish of St Mary Roads Committee, but unfortunately, in my view at any rate, we don't have the final say if the minister is an overriding public interest test, and so you will know better than I on this. And if the minister, which is the infrastructure minister, were to approach the Highway Authority on that basis, basically the St Mary Roads Committee would either have to make the application itself or he would take it over. And further, once it was taken over, whilst again the law does initially say that the land formerly the site of the road is for the use of the parish, again the Attorney General advises that it cannot be used for anything else other than that for which the application was made. But I do make the distinction between the extinguishment of the road and the planning application, because the extinguishment of the road is a separate matter. Curiously, the Bridging Island Plan makes no reference to it in its policy here or in the policy statement. It is a separate matter, and the application can be opposed by, I think the wording is, anyone aggrieved. And whoever is to preside over that application, I perhaps have to bear in mind there were 600 or so representations, so it will not be an easy job. And the point I'm making, sir, that if an application is to be made, extinguished application, how soon can it be made? And I will maintain, sir, that it can only be in the public interest to make that application once a planning application is made and agreed. It cannot surely be made on the basis of a safeguarding application, because there's no proven ability that it will be fulfilled. So I maintain, sir, that any application for extinguishment will have to be delayed until after a planning application is made. If that is the case, again, what purpose is there in giving this safeguarding provision? So on that basis, sir, I did ask for my name to be put on the report accompanying the original proposition. I'm proud of it. It is still there, and I hope that members will vote in accordance with the proposition and with my own views as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Gorst.
Can I firstly thank both you and the bailiff for allowing me to be at home today, having COVID in the family and needing to manage childcare arrangements. So this is a Bridging Island plan that lasts for 3 years rather than the normal 10-year island plan. And I think that the Minister's proposal to include this field might have been more credible if this was a 10-year island plan. It isn't. And I think this is a quite simple decision for us. We know from the evidence that the quarry will not need this field during the period of the island plan. We know that this field is not zoned for housing. We know that this field is used for farming, and I bow to the superior knowledge of others about whether this is Jersey's premier field or not. I've got to say now, so of course, being in St Peter's, it could be. I would historically have thought that surely could only be in St Juan, but there we are. It is a field. It's good for agriculture. It's being used for agriculture. The case has not been made by the Minister or by his consultants that today is the day that we should safeguard, and I bow to the Deputy of St Mary's superior legal knowledge that what does safeguarding actually mean anyway in this context. It is not necessary to make this decision today. And I say that as well, sir, because let's be clear, people complain about having houses next to them, and it can be inconvenient. Neighbours can come and go. You might have a noisy family. They might have a party once a year. This is a quarry, sir. This is not just something at the normal level of inconvenience, that if we say it's going to be safeguarded today, then we can be absolutely certain that the quarry company, who will therefore have value, and maybe we shouldn't talk about the fact that this field was purchased and value was created in the accounts of the company by purchasing this field. It's the wrong way round, sir. And that also makes me concerned that we will simply be reinforcing that purchase in advance of any decision about this particular field. It is a very inconvenient and difficult neighbour, and once there doesn't go away. And I think it's clear that it is unnecessary at this time. The previous business plan of the quarry company was that there was sufficient ability to do what they were doing from a quarrying perspective on their existing site for another number of years. And as I said, the evidence shows that they've got more years of quarrying beyond this 3-year term. Let's just say that the next government doesn't quite get round to doing the next island plan in a timely manner. There is still excess capacity to deal with quarrying at that site without this field being included, and certainly without it being safeguarding, which to my mind is giving it the stamp of approval and inappropriately adding value to this private company. The question about whether we will need to quarry in this way into the future is a delicate question that we don't properly at this point have the answer to. As the mover of this amendment said, she has seen, and the Deputy of St Martin said, they have seen some great other possibilities already on island. But we also need to think about the balance of on-island provision, as we've just done for sand down at Simon Sand, and quarrying. Is it right that we do provide all of these aggregates on island? And there is an argument that says, yes, we should, because of the environmental impact of travel of this sort of product. But I think there is also a strong argument that says that land in Jersey is our scarce resource, and we must really seriously think about how we can produce and use other methods to replace the need for on-island quarrying in the way that this safeguarding, if we don't overturn it today, would do. And there is time to do that, sir. There's the time of this bridging island plan, and there is time beyond that whilst the quarry continues in its current use. So I really do not believe, and I don't want to focus on some of the objections that parishioners have sent to States members, because we will never quite know what happens behind closed doors. I think there is enough evidence, without delving into those types of observations, for States members today to support Senator Moore and say, let's do that other detailed thinking about what is possible, what should we use? Should we really be continuing to use the same old traditional methods of house building and road building that we have been using in the past? The answer to that's got to be no. Of course we shouldn't. If we're really going to deal with the cost of housing, then we need to use new methods of housing, which will require less aggregates than than we have used in the past, and therefore there may even, by the time we get to the end of this Bridging Island plan, not even be a need to extend that quarrying facilities further. So for me it's quite clear, and I hope that members support Senator Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Conatab of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. As members know, Le Gigolon Quarry is located on the border of St Mary and St Peter, and it is surrounded by picturesque lanes, some leading to the neighbouring parish of St Lawrence. They are enjoyed by many walkers and also visitors staying at the Green Hills Hotel. Those living close to the quarry, many of whom are in my parish, had every expectation that the quarry would close during the next decade. Previous island plans had indicated the extent of the reserves and when these might be exhausted, and there was no indication that the quarry's life would be extended. In fact, planning permission had been granted for another use. The quarry was to become a recycling centre, with activity currently located at Colette being relocated there. A cycle path was constructed along the length of St Peter's Valley to improve safety, as it was anticipated that the number of large lorries on that route would increase as they delivered waste building materials to the site. Over the last few months, we have been told numerous times that our vote on the island plan in respect of field MY966 within the mineral strategy will protect the field. But what are we protecting the field from? It is owned by the quarry, having been purchased at the end of 2019 for an amount substantially more than its value as an agricultural field. And that is what it is. It is an agricultural field located in the green zone, so there is no need for any further protection at this stage. Only the owners of the field could suggest an alternative use, and it seems highly unlikely that they would do so or receive planning permission to do so. If the protection is to ensure the quarry owners are able to construct the access road into the field, it also seems highly unlikely that they would remove material over the next few years in such a way that they would lose access from what is now a valuable asset. We are asking for field MY966 to be removed from the draft island plan and the appropriate independent research to be undertaken prior to the next plan in 3 years' time. We should not be taking a decision of this magnitude without proper analysis of whether the quarry extension is necessary. We have no real data on the impact to the nearby houses, other than a blast test during the UK planning inspector's visit. However, that test was at a substantially deeper to that which would take place if quarrying was extended to the field, where blasting would be much closer to the surface. The impact on the Green Hills Hotel would almost certainly see it close, with the loss of both the hotel and the jobs of many staff who work there. Unlike the quarry, who have the recycling option to fall back on, which would provide employment, there is no alternative for the hotel. There have been suggestions that we need the extension of the quarry to meet the demands of the hospital and forecast housing demands from within this plan. But all this is scheduled to be completed before the existing reserves at Le Gigolon would be depleted. In addition, as we have already heard, they have other reserves under the existing plant. These may be more difficult to extract and require the plant to be moved, but they should not be dismissed. The island's second quarry, which has recently had planning approval for a substantial increase in the area it can quarry. So do we actually need to extend the life of the Le Gigolon quarry? The independent inspectors have used an inconsistent assumption that the other quarry can produce 150 tonnes
of material a year. However, that quarry is stated in the current island plan, the Arup report, and in their 2021 planning application P2016/0174 that it can produce over 200,000 tonnes per year of aggregates, far in excess of the figure used by the independent inspector, and up to 230,000 tonnes. In their previous report, Arup uses a figure of 259,000 tonnes. That's over 50% more than the independent inspectors have used in their assumptions. And then, if anyone wants to look for that, that was in section B13 of the previous report. It is therefore entirely feasible that the other quarry could meet current demand for aggregate, especially as there are now other sources. The volume of recycled aggregates has also been underestimated, and this is an important new source of material. We looked at the new crushing and washing facility at the Colette this morning. They aim to produce over 100,000 tonnes of recycled aggregate this year, and they are already producing more than the estimates in the draft island plan. As a government, we should be encouraging this activity, and that's something we discussed this morning. There needs to be a culture change. People need to be encouraged to use recycled aggregates. Recycled aggregates are not generally used in structural concrete or only in small percentages. Nevertheless, our current volumes of new aggregates can adequately cover the demand for structural concrete, and recycled aggregates can then be used for the vast number of non-structural applications. In fact, why are we considering digging another big hole in the island when we have recycled materials that can be used for much of our work? We could also utilise imported aggregates. Comparisons of gate prices per tonne indicate that the gate price of aggregates in the UK can be as low as 1/3 of the gate price in Jersey. And I thought that was quite shocking when I looked at 1/3 of the price of the gate price in Jersey. And even with import costs, which are considerable, they can be imported without increasing the cost of building in Jersey. I would also mention to members that the owners of Le Gigoland were recently involved in a planning inquiry to determine quarry plans for Hatfield Aerodrome. And this is really a warning about how our decision today could be interpreted. Making his final case, the QC for the quarry owners highlighted the inclusion of the site in the County Council's Minerals Local Plan. And using the words that we use, this identified it as a site where permission is likely to be forthcoming. So by having included it in their minerals plan, that was used as a reason why planning should be given. And that's exactly what we're doing today. So we must act with great care. 265 out of the 705 draft bridging plan submissions during the consultation voiced concern regarding the potential quarry expansion. That's 38% of the total. I would ask members to please support Senator Moore's proposition. There is no harm in delaying the decision for 3 years, when at that time we should have all the relevant information in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conatab. Conatab of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I feel I should say a few words as this is partially in the parish. My concern is the people living in the immediate vicinity, including the Green Hills Hotel. Any further ingress into the land would put the quarry operation very close to those properties. This process of a quarry extension has drawn many complaints from the homeowners and the hotel, as it puts a quarry far closer than one would wish for safety reasons. It will create noise, dust, and serious vibration during blasting operations. It is not important to make a decision on this today, on this Bridging Island plan, as Senator Gorst has implied, as it will not affect the operation of the quarry for the next 3 years plus. A change in method of construction will drastically reduce the use of sand and aggregate, a method which we need to adopt in order to supply the demand of really affordable housing. I support Senator Moore's proposition in order to protect the surrounding residents in St Mary and St Peter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Connétable of St John.
Thank you, sir. So last year I attended a planning committee meeting for an application of the extension of a quarry. The application was heard following several years of planning, and the applicant had done and continues to do a lot of work around the environment. So it may surprise members to know that I was there to actually support that application. I was happy to support as the company, having worked with the parish and other stakeholders, I was convinced that this was the right thing to do. The Committee Rural that I've mentioned several times in the last 2 weeks did have reservations to start with, but they also, following the process, didn't object to the extension. The Deputy of St Mary spoke about the need for a detailed environmental impact assessment. Sir, I know that the quarry in St John did and does extensive work in this area. They continue to look at alternatives at every opportunity to reduce their impact on the environment. I too have today visited the island's new third quarry this morning, and I have to say, sir, I was very impressed. I was impressed by the operation, I was impressed by the methods used, and the technology that has been implemented. The result, sir, the result is good quality aggregates being produced here on island from recycled products. A win-win. There is discussion about the cost of imports, and with the current steep rise in fuel costs, that is concerning. However, I have actually done considerable amount of work in this area during my time in logistics, and I believe there is a workable solution, and that would be to combine inbound products, imports, with our current export of products such as ash. And by having vehicles in closed loops, this would considerably reduce the impact of costs to importation and also reduce the impact on the environment. Sir, I don't believe the case has been made to rezone this field, and I'll be supporting the Senator's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Connétable of St One.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow my fellow constable on this, and this time I will attempt to get my geography right. To be clear, St One's is not next door to St John's. However, I do have some previous experience of this quarry because my late father-in-law had a field which many years ago disappeared into the quarry. So we have personal experience of the operation of that quarry. And I would endorse the Constable of St John's comments about the quarry up on the north coast. As I was the president of the Jersey Motorcycle and Light Car Club, and there is relevance to this, when they negotiated with us to increase the size of their quarry, and I have to say they were, it was very carefully planned, that they have taken great care to protect the environment, and they've given us a plan which allowed us to carry on the activity of motocross in the area, and then to reinstate the land afterwards so that we can, effectively it will look exactly the same. And that to me is the way to do it, sir. And I have to say, from all the reports I've received, this is not the case with the Sugarland quarry. It seems to me to have been fairly badly thought out. And what concerns me is when you look at the plan, not only are we going to lose yet another green field, and we spent the whole of this last 2 weeks fighting to keep green fields, but it's the closeness of it will bring the quarry to Green Hills Country Hotel and quite a large number of houses there. there will literally only be 2 fields between them and the quarry. And I have to say, if I was living there, I too would be very concerned about the noise, the dust, and everything else that goes with having an operational quarry there. When if you only have to go along the North Coast Road when Rhone is in action to experience the noise of that site in operation. And frankly, as a residential, closeness of that to a residential area, if I was a resident, I would be concerned, sir. So I think they've got a lot more homework to do before they achieve this. And I too, like everyone else, have received a huge amount of correspondence on this subject. And I think we need to take note of that. They clearly aren't carrying the community with them at the moment. And that's something they could learn from the quarry on the North Coast, who did carry the community with them in almost to a man. If you're going to do something like this and you're going to impose this on the community, you need to make sure that you've taken adequate precautions. And frankly, I don't think that's the case. So in short, sir, and I don't wish to detain members on this, I too will be supporting Senator Moore, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor Tarr. Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Very quickly, I mean, I don't need to repeat what many of the previous speakers have just said, but I just wanted to put a bit more context around the potential and the viability for importation of aggregate. And I think that the Councillor of St John hit on a very good point of the possibility of a sort of a mixed solution moving forward. But what happens is that we have to draw, excuse the pun, a line in the sand at some stage, because there needs to be investment in infrastructure so we can get some proper structure around and prepare for the importation of aggregate on a decent scale. And I know there's private enterprise and public sector enterprise wanting to do that. Ports of Jersey, for example, if they know we are going to actually have a policy which reduces quarrying on island, which I think we all probably support because it is ultimately unsustainable, then we need to make that stance take that stance sooner or later, so we can start establishing a market and give that market time to settle, so we can start getting better value, certainty of distribution, and regular distribution. Senator Moore referred to some comments I made last year, sir, in relation to this, which were confirmed by a local business owner who has managed to successfully import aggregate at a better value by just paying a lot of attention to doing that, sir. So I think the sooner we take a stance against the expansion of quarrying, the sooner we can find a solution, sir, to providing the aggregate we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy St Peter.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm not sure I'm going to add very much to some of the excellent speeches that have already been given on this particular subject. And I think the case is very strongly being put forward to support Senator Moore. However, as the Councillor from Peter said, 38% of comments into the Bridging Island Plan were on this particular subject. And I just want to add my support for the residents of St Peter's and St Mary in their absolute passion in this particular subject. So, and actually, in the words of one of the people who will be most affected by extension to this quarry, and I will paraphrase it, if it is absolutely necessary for the quarry to be extended so the island as a whole will benefit, then I won't get in the way. Now, how refreshing to know there is at least one non-NIMBY in Jersey. But, sir, we don't know if it's necessary. Indeed, I suggest it never will be. And the real question I ask is, why are we being asked to rezone prime agricultural land and lose a beautiful country lane without far more detail? If the need for crushed granite from this quarry is essential, we have a perfectly acceptable process. It's called planning. And planning will review all the needs and evidence in the public domain to ensure the outcome is considered in the best interest of our island. What this amendment does say to planning, that should an application be lodged, there will be a presumption to approve, as the State Assembly said so in the recent Bridging Island Plan, a presumption without the full examination of the facts. What is clear is the conflicting view on the available reserves. According to the draft Bridging Island Plan, the island has 17 years of winnable reserves. I believe 12 years at Rhone and the balance at the Gigulat. Now, Now, when both quarries remove or relocate equipment, a further 6 years of reserves are released at both sites, meaning we now have 30 years of winnable reserves. Now, let us not forget, this includes the need to build over 4,000, 5,000 homes wherever we are, and of course our much needed hospital. And also, I know members have alluded to this, let us not forget that the world of construction is changing. Modern methods of construction will reduce the need of crushed granite or concrete to almost nothing. As an island, we are trying to embrace technical enhancements, so we must fully understand this before making such a dramatic decision on our environment. Sir, the public health concerns have not been addressed, I don't believe, to date in any speeches. Clearly, the residents who live nearby are deeply concerned, and before any presumptions are made, a detailed analysis of the risk of the dust, and I'll try and get this out properly, sir, respirable crystallina silica must be undertaken. And finally, let us not forget we have a tourism industry. We must factor in detail the effect of one of the jewels in our island. Okay, Green Hills is in my parish, so I'm biased. But to make the presumption of extending a quarry to within 225 metres of it without established irrevocable need is just wrong and unnecessary. Sir, I urge all members to support this amendment. It is unnecessary and we don't need to do it now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And some excellent speeches, including that of the Deputy of St. Peter just now. I do risk repeating some of the things said. This is unnecessary. This safeguarding has come from effectively nowhere, and it's been done with, the Environment Minister may argue, consultation through the island plan process, but obviously, as we know, the island plan is many hundreds of pages long. There's many, many, many things in there. And whilst hundreds of the comments for across the whole island plan came about this single issue, I think if any of us were to go to speak to any of the residents in the area, they would feel like they haven't been consulted with, because they have had to react to this. They've had to motivate themselves and immobilise themselves, and my goodness, what a good job they have done, and quite rightly so. So I also praise the residents of St Mary and St Peter, and a few in St Lawrence, who also joined in with that action. I thank them a great deal. This safeguarding, I think one of the key issues here is this necessary now? No, it is not. Does safeguarding change anything? Yes, it does. If we allow this safeguarding to go through, I can promise the Assembly there will be a presumption towards any planning application going in that it will succeed. It is that simple. And to be honest, we saw that with the quarry on the North Coast. And this isn't a criticism. The quarry on the North Coast was passed by the Planning Committee, but it was quite clear that the area for extension had been safeguarded for extension, and that made it, from a Planning Committee perspective, very difficult to say no to it, as long as they had the right environmental controls, etc., etc. And as the Constable St John has said, you know, he was almost perhaps surprised himself that he found himself able to support it. So if the safeguarding does go through, there will be a presumption that planning application will succeed. On the other hand, if this isn't safeguarded, the quarry owners have every right to go ahead with their planning application. There's absolutely nothing to stop them continuing with their planning application. They can do so today if they wish. Nothing stops them doing that. The clear difference is, though, safeguarding almost guarantees success. So I would say, in order to have a proper consultative period, even if the planning application went in today, I would say we do it without the safeguarding, because then there will be a higher bar of assessment for that application. I also wanted to talk about, I'm really pleased Deputy St Peter mentioned it, was the health effects, and this does partly speak to my amendment, which is next up. But there, I spoke to the owners and manager of the Gigeland quarry earlier this week. I visited the quarry earlier this week, and they said there is currently no dust monitoring at the Gigaland quarry. That, to me, is a concern. I expressed that to them. I'm not saying anything differently. I don't understand why we have inland quarrying near residential properties without any dust monitoring. And not just dust monitoring that is recorded by the company, but is publicly known and shown, real-time available dust monitoring. And this is here a 2006 environmental impact assessment and application for planning permission for deepening the one of the quarry areas in La Gigaland. And we can see here that some of the properties, they've got a list here of properties nearby, and so this isn't the extension part, this is the western part. Some of the properties, one of them is as close as 40 metres away from the quarry boundary. Another one is just 55 metres away. Obviously in here, it points out that the hotel is 395 metres away, but obviously with the extension, it will be much, much closer. The extension pushes the quarry much closer to that hotel. It pushes it much closer to a number of other buildings, which at the moment here are 300 or 400 metres away. I find it quite astounding that we have a quarry 40 metres away from residential buildings. There's nothing we can change there, but I find that astounding. So that is the kind of level of proximity we're talking about, and we don't have any dust monitoring to go with it. So there are significant health effects with the issue of dust. I won't spend too much because I will be repeating myself in a few minutes otherwise. But it's also notable that in the UK, in Westminster, there is a private member's bill at the moment going through Parliament. Obviously, private members' bills in the Westminster Parliament have to follow a rather torturous process, and many of them fall by the wayside regardless of their merits. But there is one going through at the moment which is focused on the dust created by quarrying and the need to create a distance between quarries and residential properties. So I think that's interesting because people realise quarrying creates particulate matter, both PM10, PM25. A lot of that includes silica, which we know is harmful to lungs, but we know particulate matter is really harmful to lungs as well. We know it's being created. I think an important aspect there is obviously with the extension, whilst I am not completely au fait with the way it will be quarried, but the extension, this 2006 environmental impact assessment was for deepening a quarry. So the quarry there was already low, it was already deep. As you go into an extension, you're now talking about being back at the surface and coming down again. So the work will not be as contained as it is in a deep quarry. So I think that's incredibly important. The inspectors, the existing planning inspectors' comments do say in there that there are, and I can't help but feel, I know planning inspectors have to be dispassionate, but sometimes it does feel like some of the things they say may be a little understated. There are clearly some environmental costs associated with quarry expansion, which should not be dismissed lightly. These include bringing noise, vibration and dust closer to some residential properties in Green Hills Hotel, the loss of some trees, and a less direct routing of La Rue Béchevez. It says they shouldn't be dismissed lightly, but it feels like they're being dealt with lightly, just in that statement. That's pretty much it. They then move on. And which then brings me to the other issue, which has been brought up, which is the quality of the information that has been gathered to support the minister's inclusion of the safeguarding. And there's no question that that has to be questioned. We have a firm that has been used as the key consultants. I believe Senator Moore in her report talks about how they've been used by the Environment Department for something like 22 years, the same firm. That in itself raises alarm bells for me. That should never happen, that you use the same firm year in, year out. I believe the figures that are used in there, perhaps not all, but most of them, and certainly as far as available tonnage of aggregate that can be quarried, they have all come from the firm involved, the firm that owns the quarry. So we've been asking the people with the biggest financial interest in this extension to provide us with the information to support the extension. That I have a real issue with as well. And I believe this 3-year period, if we say no to the safeguarding today, this 3-year period can be used to have proper independent assessments of not only the availability of aggregate in that quarry, including the availability under the plant area, because that has been ignored. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons of aggregate under the plant area. And that hasn't been mentioned. And we can use those 3 years to actually have to gather the information that will satisfy not only this assembly, but also the residents of this island, and particularly the residents who live nearby, as to whether or not the extension of that quarry is the right way forward. Today, we don't have that information. Unfortunately, the Minister's information that he has used doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And for that reason alone, we shouldn't agree to this safeguarding. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Hegarah.
Thank you, sir. I didn't actually intend to speak because I think everybody said everything. However, I want to throw a little bit of a different mix into it. I will certainly be supporting Senator Moore's proposition to have this removed, this amendment rather. This is my thinking. The road is the property, effectively, of the parish of St Mary. So if the Roads Committee of St Mary decide that they don't want to lose the road, then it will go to a court process. That court process will make a decision based on the public interest. Now, will that public interest test be influenced by a decision made by this Assembly? And that, I can't actually say. So if, hypothetically, sir, we were to approve this today, or approve for this site to be safeguarded, will that reflect in any court process that will follow in relation to a public interest test? Because we'd all be saying, we think that it is in the public interest to safeguard this land for this purpose. So will that have an influence on the court case that would follow the public interest of whether or not St Mary's should lose their road? So from that point, as I said, I'm already supporting this amendment, but this is a concern because, I mean, I don't have a profound knowledge of public interest. I've only ever really done it in legislative matters or in relation to the freedom of information. But I do wonder whether that would have an impact. And that's why I wanted to raise that point, sir, for those people who may think that this is a good idea, just to reflect on that when it comes to the public interest test, we may have already aided and abetted that process. This, for me, is not essential. It's not like, and we've all remember the conflicts about Queen's Valley, but it was water, and we all have to have water. So whatever your thought processes were, it was essential. I don't think this is essential, and I think most of us around this room don't, because there are new ways coming forward, and you can look at other things. So from me, sir, I will be supporting the amendment, but I just wanted people to think about that prospect. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thought I would wait and hear views. I think members have made some excellent points, but I think I'm going to present the case for why the proposal appears in the Bridging Island Plan. I'm not standing here as an advocate for the company. I have been on site, I've listened to the views. I think what I've sought to do, it's my job to give the state's members the choices. As I said at the beginning, there are difficult choices, and we've faced most of them this week, and I think the Assembly has done well. And I suspect this is, I'm hoping this is the last major debate we'll have on this, where there is a huge choice. And the question for the plan is this: are we going to plan for the availability of our own construction materials from our own natural resources in the island, or are we not? Now, I have to accept that Deputy Morell, I think, is very, very critical. We don't have the evidence and so on. I won't go over the comments he made. I mean, he's right, it's not perfect. But as I stand here today, a lot of money and effort has been invested into try and get at this answer to help you make the decision. We went to Arup, experts in the field who do this work all the time. They have spent work with engineers, with the firms concerned, with the whole market analysis of the current rate of construction, use of construction materials, the reserves left, and attempt to forecast, and they have given us that advice. Members, I think, have been invited onto site visits to talk to the quarry owners, but I accept they're going to come from a position of their business. But that opportunity has been available. I personally have been on site myself. Members have had the opportunity to look at the effects that there are that they're unarguable. The proposal to safeguard a field which is on the edge of this current quarry is going to have environmental significance. And I think the things that members have said about a planning application is right, is that safeguarding a site in a plan, and this, I need to be clear about this, as I've tried to be clear all week on our site decisions, does not confer planning consent. This site has a statutory requirement of an environmental impact assessment. Statutory, in law. That needs to be done. I've already said if I was the minister dealing with such an application, it would have to go, in my view, to a planning inquiry into the application itself. In other words, not to be going to the planning committee. I think it meets the criteria for an application were to come in, where instead of at the moment where the debate has gone on in the principles, because that's what the inspectors have done, they've had to look at the policy. And they've had to say, well, this is a policy, it's a plan, it's a bridging island plan, but it's nonetheless, it's a planning framework. But when you get to a planning application inquiry, then it gets right down into the fine details of all the things members have spoken about. And I'm very clear that because it's safe, if it were safeguarded in this plan, that does not mean consent would be issued. And if there was any failures in that process, the whole business would be open to judicial review and challenge anyway to pull the thing apart. So the process is there. Now, why is it in this plan? And I ask that. Why do we need to do this now? And what I'm told is that the estimates and the forecasts of the expert work mean that if we don't safeguard this within our planning framework now, by the end of 2025, the numbers I've got here, I've seen, other people may argue these numbers, but of course they were thrashed around ad infinitum in the planning inquiry, that we will have less than 10 years supply at the end of 2025 for our own construction materials. Virtually all that supply then will be from the St John's quarry. Virtually all of it. At that point, the figures that I've seen mean that the St Peters Valley quarry, I can never pronounce the same properly, Jiggerland, will be out. And the scenario, the owners, of course, will be looking for after use. And of course, they've already got consent as a waste processing plant. And of course, but that's not the main issue. The main issue is, are we going to have our plan, our development plan, our planning framework? Are we going to plan for that material or are we not? Because there are major implications of saying, we're not going to do that now, we can do that, we can put that off. What that effectively means is that we will have, I believe, to completely now go into looking into importation of construction materials. Now, I'm sure Constable St John is an expert in this, and absolutely, and I wish, if this is what happens, I would be advocating he leads this project to try and work out how it's done, because there are major implications here. And I think the Deputy of St Martin as well is very up with this kind of use of construction aggregate materials and so on. But what I recall, what the quarry owners said to me is, well, I asked them, I said in my naivety, if we, of course, when you go to the quarry, what do you find? There's a batching plant. There are lots of different products, all graded according to the various grade of quality required by the industry, different size aggregates, different strengths for different materials, and of course they employ 39 people who, who go around and deliver these construction aggregates onto site, ready-mix concrete to order, and it's all there. So the question I ask is, well, okay, if we didn't have this, what would we do? Would we import finished products into St Helier Harbour? Or would we issue raw bulk materials? And they said to me, well, if you import bulk materials, we need very, very large land areas and landing areas to be able to unload boats. There's a lot of, dust handling and all this, unloading of lorries. That, at the moment, from what I can see in the Ports of Jersey's plan, as I said, is not in the current Bridging Master Plan. But I think if a decision is made that we aren't going to plan for it now and we're going to defer that, now until the next plan. I don't think we could just sit back and wait for that. I think that work would have to go on now. And that means I can only speculate as to what the financial consequences and capital investment required in our ports are. So now, as I said, it's a framework. And of course, why do we need 10 years planning? And I'm told, well, that's an international recognised standard for planning frameworks. It is in the UK, and I suppose this explains why the planning inspectors thought that it was right to put it in the plan, that it's a national policy framework. It's national planning policy framework to have a 10 years rolling plan for the supply of materials. And so that's why we got. Now, it is equally true, and I hear the arguments, well, what difference does it make? It's true that I believe that the company, they own this field, they could go ahead and put in an application whether or not this is safeguarded or not in this plan. And I wouldn't. I'm not leading in any way, but I think that's entirely possible. But of course, if there's not safeguarded, then I think then we would be the same issues would be relevant, because in the end, the planning decision maker would need to decide on the balance of the planning arguments, and there's no escaping this, as whether the benefits to the community outweigh the negatives. And there are very significant negatives for the people around that, and I feel very much, particularly for the Green Hills Hotel. Deputy Morvell quotes distances and so on. I think I've asked to see those, but as a tourist facility, I can understand how marketing and perception, would affect their market. So I will have to maintain what I regard as the professional position, and because I think that's my job. There are lots of other valid issues. The issues about the road being extinguished, absolutely right. In fact, I agree with that. Well, there's legal processes for that. But I'm convinced that why we're trying to do this, why it's in the draft plan, is to provide a framework to allow us to plan for the future. And as I'm pretty certain that members are going to adopt this amendment and take it out. I'm certain of that, listening to the debate. If I was sitting in other seats, I might, but I'm in this seat. It's my job. But there are major implications of doing so. And I want members, please, to be very aware of that and make that, be very clear about that. There are major implications. That work needs to start now, and how we plan for the importation of materials. I think, I like the aspirations of members that suddenly things are going to change, that we don't need concrete anymore because we've got all these new methods coming. Well, I just ask, will they all be there in the volume required by 2026? Will they? Do members think that? Will we not need concrete in structural foundations anymore? Will we not need concrete if we construct a hospital in the next few years? I use it if because that's very dangerous territory for me. The volume of concrete in there must be enormous. So I'm going to maintain my position that I believe it's right that the plan includes this, and obviously members will vote as they so choose. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Connotar of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to just pick up on the detail of the process of extinguishing a road, which has been referred to in previous speeches. It's my understanding, sir, that the matter would have to be recommended to a parish assembly by a roads committee. That's my experience in the past. I suspect the first obstacle would be to have the roads committee support the proposition. Now, sir, if the parish committee were to refer this to a parish assembly and it were to be rejected by that body, what would be the process thereafter? And would it be appropriate for the Attorney General to be asked to elaborate on that, sir?
Yes, Mr. Attorney?
So yes, I'm happy to answer that question, sir.
Yes.
So there's a provision in the relevant legislation is the Extinguishment of Roads Law of 1972, and there is an article, it's Article 2, Paragraph 2 of that law, and it essentially provides a jurisdiction for either the Highways Authority or for the Minister to make an application to the Royal Court seeking an order for the extinguishment of the relevant road or roads. And whilst the parish assembly may reject the proposition to extinguish the relevant road, there is still jurisdiction for the minister to either require the parish, the parish to make the application, or the Highways Authority to make the application, or for the minister himself to make the application under Article 2.2 of the law. So I think the important point is that the view of the parish assembly is not necessarily a block to an application to extinguish the road. It is one of the points that the Royal Court would take into account when it hears the application for extinguishment of the road, and the law provides detailed provisions about who may appear in the Royal Court, who has standing to address the Royal Court on this issue. So I hope that answers the Constable's question.
I thank the Attorney General, sir, and that concludes my few words.
Thank you, Attorney. Thank you, Connotar. Does any of the members wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Connotar of St Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, sir. I wasn't going to take part in the debate for this amendment. However, I just want to address a few points that the Minister made when he spoke. And he told us that he was simply doing his job. That is why he has included this in the Bridging Island Plan debate. And I have to agree, sir. Yes, that is what he is doing. But actually, we are all here to do our job. And our job is to decide on whether or not to accept what the Minister has included or to reject it. And that is quite clear because the Minister told us in his opening words that this gives us a choice. And it is clear we have a choice. And he also said near the end of his few words, sir, that he thinks that Senator Moore is going to be supported by members with her amendment. She will be successful. And we all get the feel, don't we, within the chamber, certainly in the chamber, not virtually. So when I'm sitting at my kitchen table listening to debates, I've got no idea actually whether the Assembly is going to go with something or not. You need to be here to sense the way members feel. And I actually agree with the Minister that I think the Senator Moore will be supported. And I will urge members to support her, sir, because what the Minister has told us is that if he was the Minister when if and when a planning application went in for this field to be used for mineral extraction, if he was the Minister, in his view, it would meet the criteria for a planning inquiry. So I assumed from that hypothetically, sir, if he was the Minister, he would call a planning inquiry. But of course, he won't be the Minister. It's very unlikely that he will be the Minister if and when an application is put to use this field for mineral extraction. And of course, what we are deciding here today, our choice, the choice that the Minister has told us we all have, is whether or not to rezone, essentially, to allow this to be included for mineral extraction. And I was struck by two words in the comments of the Minister, one of the bullet points towards the end. And he tells us, the proposal in the draft plan, however, simply safeguards the site for mineral extraction. Simply safeguards, exactly. That is what it would be doing. It would be safeguarding it for the use for mineral extraction. And I just want to speak from a planning committee member perspective, sir, because very often when we consider applications that are put before us, which we as individual members of the committee may think are horrific, and why on earth can this be put to planning? I can't give any examples, sir, but I know I've felt that over the past few years. Why on earth is this coming to us? This is appalling. If this was to be approved, it is appalling. It would desecrate this, it would desecrate something else. It's too high. But the thing that we are told by officers, sir, is that there is a presumption that permission will be given. There is a presumption that permission will be given. And therefore, we are almost stuck with that because there is a presumption. Now, if the committee decided to reject the application, then it is clear that the applicant would go to appeal. And my view, sir, is that because there would have been the presumption that permission would be given, notwithstanding the views of the individual committee members, which may have rejected the application, it is almost guaranteed that the inspector who hears that appeal would come down in favour of the applicant. Then, of course, it would go to the Minister to decide whether or not to accept the inspector's recommendation. So that worries me, sir, and it was actually backed up by something that the Constable of St Peter said when he spoke earlier, because as I understood him, he was referencing a planning application from the UK. I can't remember the area that he spoke to, but it was clear to me that that reference made it clear that the presumption for development, for permission to give development, outweighed everything else. So that, sir, is our choice. We either support the Minister in his effort to have this simply safeguarded for mineral extraction, or we say no, here and now, we do not want this site to be rezoned for that. We do not want this field, a good agricultural field as we've heard, to be rezoned for that. We will make our decision now, and we will safeguard the field. We will safeguard it against the use for mineral extraction, sir. I will leave, I think that's probably the notes that I have made, sir. Just, of course, to agree with what Deputy Morale said earlier, the applicants know now that they could put in an application to apply for mineral extraction anyway, as it stands. However, it is highly unlikely, based on the current planning policies, that permission would be given. It is far more likely that permission for an application would be granted, as I have said, if we were to support the Minister in this and vote against the amendment of Senator Moore. My view, sir, is that I think members will support her, and I urge those who may be wavering or who at the moment will not be supporting her to change their minds and go with the Senator, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If not, I call upon the Senator to... Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to make a brief comment, and that is that... Sorry, I've got some background here. I just want to make a few comments. On this particular issue, I wasn't going to take a view. I was going to leave it to the people who actually live in the areas and represent the people in the areas. But there's a danger with that. And that is that many of the people who have spoken against this proposition are doing so facing an election within 90 days, whatever it is. And it's obviously an issue with people in the community, and they want to be seen to be opposing it and to support them. And I can understand that. But what I think is a concern to me is the Minister put a very good argument from the economic case saying about the implications of it. And I don't think our building techniques are going to change in the next 3 years. But what I am upset about is the fact that we have no economic data, no report that sets out, for example, the impact importing those materials is going to have. And the truth of the matter is we've just had a budget statement, not a budget statement, but a statement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK. We've had new evidence from the Office of National Statistics, and we're talking about the biggest fall in personal income, in a sense, in 50 years, with the result of all the inflation that's going to come. They're forecasting up to 10% in the UK, and we know darn well that we always get 10%, and we always get a bit more because we're an island and we have to import everything. We have no idea how oil prices are going to go, and so we have no idea what the real cost of importing materials are. And as the Minister said, are we going to buy finished products and import them into the island, or are we going to bring in the raw material? And again, as the Minister said, the ports of Jersey haven't got anything in their plan to cover this. And so it also means if we bring in bulk materials, that bulk material is going to have to be taken from the port to wherever it's going to be turned into a finished product. And so we're faced with a debate here with obviously the emotional argument from the local residents, from the local hoteliers and others, but we don't have sufficient idea of what projected costs are going to be, say 5 years from now or more. There's no data. And so I'm just expressing my concern that we don't have sufficient information in one sense to make a true judgment. I understand in this particular matter that the quarry can go to a planning commission anyway, and yes, they can go through the court route and so on. But I think it's a great pity that we haven't been given all the information so we can make a proper decision. It shouldn't just be based on emotion. And I won't, I don't think oppose the proposition, but I do think it's a failure of our process. We've had, you could say, an island plan. We have some information and we don't have a lot of others. Yet we've got to make some fundamental decisions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Senator Moore to reply. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir, and I thank everybody who's taken part in the debate. I'm very grateful to everyone who has spoken supportively. But of course, it's the Minister who we must focus our attention upon in responding, because the Minister set out very clearly the very importance of this decision. It's not something that we can take lightly, sir, and nor do any of us take this lightly. And Deputy Higgins is right to challenge our reasons for doing so, and he's quite right. There are serious economic situations arising at the moment, and we have to be extremely mindful, particularly of the potential for cost of importation. That being said, sir, we do know that there are sufficient minerals in the island for continuing extraction at current rates that will surpass the next 3 years. And so it is not correct that we are going to run out of crushed rock between now and the next debate on any island plan. Also, we can take into account and be confident, I think, in the decisions that the Assembly has taken in this island plan so far, in that we have shown our support for modern methods of construction and for prefabrication of homes. That will mean a lower need for the use of aggregates as we currently see it. And of course, as I mentioned in the opening speech, we also now have online a new recycling facility which has the potential to deliver considerable amounts of aggregates, both in terms of fine and coarse sand, but also gravel of varying grades to deliver the need for aggregates going forward. They also make concrete, which is considerably cheaper, I'm told. I don't wish this to become an advert, but I was quite struck by what I saw and what I learnt this morning, to see concrete blocks that are being sold for a third of the price of the equivalent from other providers in the island currently. And given the cost of living pressures that we see and the inflationary pressures that we see, we should be grasping any opportunity to see reduced costs, particularly in construction, and running with those. And so I hope that we can give the Minister confidence and reassurance in reminding him of those aspects. And I don't think that the inspectors, as thorough as they were able to take into account that new issue of supply when they gave their views on this particular issue in their report. So a large part of this, however, is about engagement, both the engagement of the company that has been well rehearsed, and also the engagement of people and communities in the island who, when they are fired up and worried about something, they show their power, and that is what they should do. And we are right to listen to them and to engage with them. Of course, we have to balance the facts and ensure that they are doing so with the right reasons, the right rationale. But I feel absolutely confident in continuing to bring this amendment because it is, A, the right thing to do for the local community, and B, the right thing to do in terms of the future of construction in the island, and I feel reassured and confident that we can continue to deliver and meet the homes that we want to see provided in the island going forward, but in a sustainable and a more sustainable fashion that will, in the short term at least, protect this green field, but also meet the needs of our community. So with that, I thank everybody for their contributions, and I particularly thank those members of the public who've become very engaged on this matter. They should all be commended for their hard work. And so I ask for the appel.
Thank you, Senator. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meetings via the Teams link are asked to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the amendment has been adopted. 40 votes for, 5 votes contra.
Member for 5, please, sir.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Those members voting cont, Deputy Martin, Deputy Lewis and Deputy Young, Deputy Pershard and Deputy Higgins.
So could I ask for some procedural an intervention, sir? It's to ask and from the Minister in particular about whether we can expect to come back tomorrow. What his thoughts are. I understand that there are 2 items potentially other than the island plan in terms of a statement that I wanted to make tomorrow morning for the APF, and I know that there's an urgent oral question, and it's to see whether what the Minister's thoughts were on that, if it would be helpful to plan that in advance, sir.
Well, the current position, of course, is that the Assembly resolved yesterday to break now and resume at 6 p.m. and sit till 8 p.m. So that's the current position, unless anyone makes another proposition. But Minister, do you want to ask the question that's been asked by Deputy Tellier?
Yes, sir. I think Deputy Tellier, I think Deputy Tellier's got a special reason for us wanting to ensure sit tomorrow morning, which I think sounds to me very valid, unrelated to this debate. But we have here, I think, according to the, we've now got, I think, debates on. I think there are 3 down for debate. There's Deputy Morell, and there is the Constable St Brelard, but I take it the Constable St Brelard is amending his own amendment, which would mean just 2 debates. I don't know how long they'll take. I would like time myself, to be honest, to reflect on the 2 weeks before I have to make a speech in reply, a closing speech on the plan itself. So I would prefer to be able to consider that overnight and do that in the morning, because I'm feeling really quite tired. But if other members feel differently, I'll obviously respect that, sir. So for me, I think we've a choice of whether we stick to what we said yesterday and clear the remaining 2 debates, Deputy Morell's and Conitab's, and then adjourn and come back tomorrow for the debate on the island plan, as it were, or whether we adjourn now. And I think I'll stick to our original plan. Let's clear these items as we planned. Thank you, sir. But I think if members would agree that after that we will then adjourn and deal with the final debate on the island plan tomorrow morning, which would, I think, work for Deputy Tellier's distinguished guests which are attending, sir.
Yeah, so the general view appears to be that you should adjourn now and resume at 6 o'clock and at least finish with the last 2 debates.
I propose we adjourn for 30 minutes.
30 minutes or until 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock seems to be the mood of the meeting.
Thank you, sir.